Smoke and Chill Grooves, uncopyrighted music. I don't have to worry about playing it. And we are going to start. Nice and slow as always. Trimming in tonight. Hope everybody's nice and stony. Let's get our news on. See if my computer will work. All right. So I want to announce, anybody, don't have a lot of people on yet, but for 90% of people, 92% I think of people who watch this afterwards, just so you know, I will be doing a Wednesday weed day. Going to go through states that have it on the ballot, working towards ballot, things that you can sign, things you can look forward to. For cannabis enthusiasts, we're going to go over and look through all the states that you can vote. If you're in one of those states, if you know somebody in one of those states, you can send the clips later. And that's what I'm going to I'll do a Story Progressive takedown tonight as well. And again, those are going to be clipped up and put away so that you can send them to anybody who is in that area that might need to take down some corporate stooges that are in our Congress currently. This is an election cycle. There will be tons of ballot initiatives for legalizing psychedelics in states that it's like California and Michigan are possibly going to legalize psychedelics this election. So there are things, even if you're a stony progressive in a state like Michigan, where I am half the year, you can still get your election on this year. And then let's take out some incumbents, and that can be our 2022, year. New Year's resolution for as a community. We can commute to get rid of incumbents, and that's a pretty good New Year's resolution, guys. So, but as always, I am going to start out this show nice and slow. I am going to be representing today. I'm giving this product a try. It's the lights are going to make it so you can't see it, but it is a THC free. It's just a CBD hemp flower. Local CBD hemp flower. I'm going to be trying out some of these joints tonight, just to keep it a little more smooth in the mind, but calm and mellow through the cast. But if any of you guys are blazing or drinking tonight, go ahead and get your drink cracked and your joint rolled, and let's hit our first segment. This is going to be, I'm going to start out backwards tonight. We're going to do an old school section right off the bat, and then we'll get into our, I hope that's the one. And we'll get into our others today. But we're going to start out with old school TYT. And yo. All right, we got some joiners. Hey, Jeff. So yeah, I'm going to start out with the old school TYT. I wanted to look up something from Wesley Clark Jr. Just kind of tagging videos every day. And so Wesley Clark Jr., this is the 2016 election, so 2015, so it's closer to the election, like September 27th of 2016. And this will kind of transition us into the night, but let me smoke my CBD and let's see what they have to say. I definitely saw this probably several times, but who remembers something from 5 years ago now? Who knows? Oh, let's turn on the volume probably.
Each other. Okay, now that we're on. You guys were yelling at each other before we came on air, and I want you guys to go back yelling at each other. Okay, now that we're on air. Well, so what? I guess let's first, Wes, you make the case, if you think this is the case, for why you think this election and this choice between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump is so important.
Well, listen, here's the thing. I'm not completely on the other side of Jimmy on this. For me, the whole reason I supported Sanders was that he called for a World War II scale mobilization to adapt to, as well as turn back, climate change, something that we're able to get forced into the Democratic Party platform. And for me, I want her to come out and talk about it. And she's hidden from it ever since Sanders dropped out of the race.
She hasn't mentioned climate change.
And if they want to wonder why millennials aren't lining up to vote, it's probably because you're perfectly okay to have them killed rather than, because listen, if you're like 20 years old right now and the government doesn't act quickly to solve this, you're not going to live out the end of your life and die of natural causes. And I think a lot of people understand that. And she has not addressed those issues. However, and this is getting into what that Trump will be so bad we'll have a revolution is simply wrong. Most people, despite what we all feel inside of ourselves, are fairly cowardly. And if somebody comes to your house with an armband and they beat up your children in front of you and they say, if you speak out again, we're going to come back and kill you, generally they don't speak out again. And I know people who have immigrated to this country from other parts of the world, they understand that. Most Americans don't understand that because we've been living in a kind of fantasy land meme bubble of Soma for the last 40 years with television and distractions and everything else. And I had put this piece tweeted out earlier yesterday by Arun Gupta, and it basically, you know, a lot of people seem to forget that after the U.S. fights major wars, there's a period of intense racial and political violence that usually follows it. If you go back to the end of the Civil War, you had the terrorism of the KKK versus African Americans in the South, as well as the massacres of the Plain Indians. If you go to the end of World War I, you had massacres of blacks and Chicanos, with thousands dead in 1919 and 1920, as well as massacres in the labor movement in Washington State. And they tried to do it again after World War II with racial problems in the South, and such as Mississippi, but thank God for Eisenhower, he deployed, you know, the 82nd Airborne to put a stop to it. And what people don't get is how possible violence is, real political violence in the society. And once it happens, you can't put it back together again. And so when Trump says, I'm going to eliminate the EPA and there's not going to be any controls at all on the environment, okay, that's great. We can be pissed off at him. But if we go 4 years pumping more shit into the environment, there is nothing we can do to save ourselves and our children from apocalypse, essentially.
And my rebut to that is that you are, I think, making a slight misinterpretation of the situation, which is that Trump is not the problem. He's a symptom of the problem. And we keep doing what we've always done. We're going to get another Trump, and the next Trump might actually be competent, like Ted Cruz, because Donald Trump is an incompetent, and he will have extra scrutiny, and he won't be able to get any of the horrible stuff done that people think he. This is my theory, and we've been doing this thing. We've been doing this, and they've been putting up a worse candidate and a worse candidate. And this is we're living in what they call inverted totalitarianism right now. We live in an oligarchy right now. Not
arguing that point.
So to keep voting for more oligarchy, I'm afraid of what the next Trump's going to look like. And I'd rather vote for Jill Stein and try to build up a real lefty party in this country so we can counter. Hey, if she was polling at 5 or 10%, maybe Hillary Clinton would be trying to be more of a lefty instead of trying to get Jeb Bush voters, which is what suppresses the vote. Half the country still doesn't vote West. Half the country. And did you know that things are worse than you think they are? Do you know 1 in 4 kids in America lives in poverty?
Yes.
Not poor.
Yes.
In poverty.
Yes.
You know half the country now is considered poor?
Yes.
Half. In
Yes.
the richest goddamn country. Wall Street setting records, profits, so are corporations, and you want us to vote for more of the same. People ain't gonna do it, which is why she's fucking losing.
Here's the
Wes,
thing.
that's
I don't
why.
want you to vote for more of the same. With the climate mobilization, we're gonna fucking force her to nationalize it and mobilize the country. And if we try and do that under Trump, we'll be killed. So there's a difference to me. It's the ability to move somebody to our position, somebody who respects law and who respects freedom of speech and isn't going to put us in a fucking labor camp. And that my brother-in-law, who is dark-skinned and lives in Phoenix, isn't going to be pulled out of his car by a bunch of fucking vigilantes in 4 months and shot in the fucking head. It matters, dude. It really fucking matters. And for people who think Donald Trump isn't dangerous, just listen to what the guy says. This is a guy trying out for a job interview. And that's when people are supposed to be on their best behavior. Now imagine what he's going to be like as president after he's already said, I'm not going to pay back the debt. We shouldn't have so much freedom of speech. We should be beating up opponents. What do you think is going to happen when he's elected? What do you think is going to happen to us when he's elected if we speak out against him?
There's a protein.
Yeah, of course. Commercials to a 5-year-old episode, 6-year-old episode that they're not going to get paid on. I hate YouTube.
So, I agree that when you say that it matters, I think you're implying that I don't think it matters. I think it matters a whole bunch, which is why I'm super serious about it and thinking about it 24 hours a day. And I just like you, I think, kind of agree with my position, I also am sympathetic to your position. This isn't easy.
No, and I'm sympathetic to yours.
Right.
This is a
I went to a Trump
very,
rally.
very hard
decision
for me because I do not support what she stands for. I do not support the present system.
Here's my also another here. If you want to talk fear, I'll talk fear. So in 2 years, right now they think the Senate might flip right to Democrats, which is a great thing in a sense. But because of the way she's campaigning selfishly, it probably won't, right? So then we're stuck with Republican Congress, Senate, and Congress, at least for the next 4 to 6 to 8, 10 years, right? And then we're going to get a Republican in 4 years. Nobody's going to reelect her. So long term, it's horrible. In 2 years, I mean, she's not going to get anything done anyway except right-wing stuff. Again, we've got to break the fever of neoliberalism because that's what creates Trump. And I know it is scary. It's scary. And I'm not saying it's not scary. I'm saying that I'm betting he's an incompetent, and I'm betting that the American people will rise up.
I'm willing to bet you every mass murdering dictator in history is a fucking incompetent. That's why they kill people. That's why they have absolute control, because they're incompetent. Look at any general that's run a country. The country falls apart because generals don't know how to fucking fix the roads or get the electricity to go in. Look at Hitler, Mao, Stalin. Millions of people dead because they're incompetent. That's a fundamental thing about tyrants.
Yeah, it's not the bug, it's the feature. So I am in a lot of ways more afraid of his incompetence than I am of his bad intent, because when he goes and accidentally starts a war with North Korea, oh my God, you just accidentally killed 285,000 South Koreans. What have you done, you idiot, right? So now, when Hillary Clinton starts a war, she means to start a war. So she's not going to bungle into one. She might start one anyway.
No, she could absolutely bungle in. She's bungled into 2 of them as Secretary of fucking State.
So his argument is, God, Jenks an idiot. His argument is at least the Democrats know when they're getting into war, and Trump would have just slipped into one. That's so freaking stupid. That's not an argument. You're accepting that the military-industrial complex owns both the freaking parties. It's not a discussion. And just for everybody's record, if you don't follow TYT or the history, a little bit after this, Wesley Clark Jr. there, I mean, he's, he has, military history and a family military history. I mean, he's well versed on the subject, but he kind of got that aggression towards everybody and everything, and went off the deep end on Twitter for about a year and then disappeared for a while. Hopefully he's collected, because that is a dark rabbit hole you can go down and constantly arguing with people. But this is very much what happened.
Well, I hear you on that too, but not in the way that Trump would. So Hillary Clinton is not going to be like, Kim Jong-un's unstable. I didn't know that. He sent me a mean tweet, so I started bombing him.
That's true. Okay. That's true.
All right, so now, having said all that, I think the compromise, even though it seems like the two opinions are so stark, and I actually have great sympathy for both sides, I'm going to argue that the compromise is easy. So we fight Trump now. So there's the rise of the angry white man, his last gasp for air, not white people, but the angry white man of the Mad Men era, the ones that like the racism and the sexism and the old society and the way things were, and they're rising up in their fury now because they think this is their last shot at a demographic victory. Next time around, they have almost no chance as the demographics of the country continue to shift to more in favor of the Democrats. So this is their last gasp, going, like, maybe we can end this, because if we continue on democracy, we're screwed. Think about that for a second. All those right-wingers, in their gut, they know if we continue down this democratic path, we are screwed. The right wing, and the way things used to be done, when they owned everything and they controlled everything, that's done for. So God help us if they get in power that one last time. Okay, then we turn around and we hopefully finish off the angry white man, Mad Men era nonsense this time. Then next election, we go finish off the establishment. There, Jimmy, we're not going to have any compromise, okay? Then I'm going to be 1,000% on your side. And I'm not going to have a conversation about because we're going to primary the hell out of her.
Back when there's a possibility that Cenk would be on Jimmy's side. Oh, times have changed.
We're not going to wait for a general election. You know how they said don't primary Obama? Hell no. Hell no. I'm not going to let a Republican beat Hillary Clinton. We're going to beat Hillary Clinton. And we're going to primary her, and you think, oh, primaries don't work. Yeah, except that Lyndon Johnson ran for his life and didn't run for a second term because he was getting primaried, right? And primaries do work. That's why the establishment always tells you not to primary people, because they're the ones getting primaried. So we start fighting Hillary Clinton on day one. If we're lucky, we push her in the right direction. And as someone just told me a little while ago, she likes to be in front of a parade. You throw the parade, she'll jump in front of it.
Yep.
That's the lucky best case scenario. Worst case scenario is she doesn't. Okay? Great, then we beat her. Okay? And we don't, there's no compromise. We fight, and we take the establishment down the next time. Because, Jimmy, you're right, they put us in a terrible spot. We all agree. I mean, in a way, it's a great last trick of the establishment. Jesus. But they're playing with fire. The trick is, well, what are you going to vote for? Mussolini? Right?
Well,
it's true, because now it's not working anymore if you throw a Romney out there or a McCain.
And they just completely ignore the fact that mainstream media blasts and undercuts third parties for like 3 months every election cycle right before the election. Even though in 2016, we maybe had the best two options to get on at least the stage and talk. But nobody wants, when they have these kind of discussions, they want to ignore the third party, which is what Jimmy is. He's going for Jill Stein. I voted for Jill Stein. I don't care about saying that. Like, the third party is a viable option. They are, like, even getting them to 15% will put them into a whole different category. But no, the elections, everything is dictated by two independent companies. They're not even like when they say parties, they're not even parties run by our government. They're parties that are independent to themselves. They can do whatever the hell they want technically. They can just say, we wanted Biden. We don't need to actually do this electoral whole pretending to be a primary thing and just end up in the back room saying, nope, it's going to be Biden either way. They can do that. They've proved it in law. They can do that.
Out there. Now we're going to make it worse because you hate the establishment even more today than you did 4 years ago or 8 years ago. So now we got to give you Trump so you go in this direction. But then they're out of their bag of tricks, okay? So, but last thing, guys, before the debate starts. Look, the answer, and this is where maybe we really disagree, Jimmy, but the answer isn't like a third party rises like a phoenix out of the ashes and somehow in this system gets from 3% to 38% or 51%. The answer is an amendment so that you get money out of politics. So we fix the system. We fix the infrastructure that creates all the terrible candidates in the first place. If you fix the system, then
he's probably going to do a wolfpack.com advertisement, which him and his friends made a decent amount of money trying to promote an idea of getting money out of politics. And they did a little bit of work, but they made sure everybody's paid too. So not exactly a pure profit.
You might actually get decent Democratic candidates. Hell, you might even get decent Republican candidates because they would be responsive to you and not the donors. That's the real revolution. You do that revolution, you'll get a lot of great candidates. You don't do that revolution, you're going to try to struggle up that hill of a third party maybe 7 elections from now. I don't mind the third party. Fix the system, then let's have 18 parties.
That's never how it would work. God, he's corrupt. All right, that got me awake. I don't know if you're awake, but that got me awake. Annoying jerk. Okay, so I wanted to start out today, the real day, with a interview I watched a couple days ago, and it kind of got lost in the debate of two bigger names, Sam Cedar and Jackson Hinkle. And so at that same day, that same night, there was a really good interview, and the interview kind of almost became more of a debate for a while. It was, a heated interview, but that can be way more civil, way more interesting than two people spatting at each other like the debate happened. The debate was a complete spat fest. Not much got accomplished, and I will say this again, the only thing that got accomplished was proving that Sam Cedar and his whole team are not even remotely progressive. And then the other thing it accomplished was it divided everybody again. It just showed like how many people were just rah rooting, like, oh, I got destroyed. This guy got destroyed. That guy got destroyed. Yeah, it was not like an actual good debate. So, but that same night, they completely missed something actually good. And there's my YouTube. So let us get on here. So this is Sabby, Sabrina Silvani. Her channel is Sabby Sabs with a space on YouTube here. And I actually follow her on Rockfin. She is somebody that I watch primarily on Rockfin, because Rockfin, you actually earn them more crypto and money by watching them than you would on YouTube. So per view payout is way higher. So I watch them on Rockfin, but for this purposes, because last time I tried to watch Rockfin, they throttled me. I think they've already have once tonight. So let us start out with some Sabby Interview. This is a long interview. We'll stop a handful of times. It's an intense interview, so we might need a session even.
PhD student at the University of Georgia, and he's also the host of The Funky Academic. Hi, Irene.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Sabby. This should be a hoot.
Thanks so much for coming on. Before we get into tonight's discussion, I did want to ask you, why did you decide to start The Funky Academic?
Yeah, why did I started The Funky Academic because I don't think we're very good about talking about meaning in our lives. And I thought philosophers aren't very good at talking to regular people, to non-philosophers, about meaning in their lives. So I thought I just wanted to start a few short videos about, basic issues in philosophy. What's justice? What's neoliberalism? What are institutions? How do we think about meaning in our lives? What's a marriage? All these things that we take for granted, and it's kind of presumptuous to kind of discuss the meaning of life and what that means. What's a job? What do jobs mean? You don't know what a job means till you lose one, right? So I wanted to discuss all of these things in kind of a hip way. So I started these little short videos set to music, but then there started to be a bigger appetite about some of the issues. So I started the weekly show on Friday or Thursday afternoons. And then, I got picked up. I went on the Hill with Crystal Ball and Saga and Jetty one time. I'm going back on their new show Breaking Points next week. So they picked up a little bit of steam, and people didn't want to squander their lives. So they went and watched some of my videos, and I think I helped people think through some of their more thorny issues in a non-cliche way.
Awesome. So one of the things I've been talking about often on the show, especially the last couple of months.
And this is a really long video. We'll only watch half of it or so, but I have it on 1.25 speed because it does sometimes drag and sometimes they talk fast. I apologize. I just wanted to increase the rate of our input of information, even though hopefully you're stony with me.
There's a lot of focus on left versus right, and I do agree that dialogue needs to be had. But at the same time, I try to focus heavily on the class issue and the class divide that we have in this country. And one of the things that I've noticed, I'm trying to encourage people to come together on the class issue, mainly the 99%. And I have noticed, I've gotten feedback from people, and some people have said that they actually don't feel like we can come together on the class issue because there's racial division as well. And that's what I wanted to talk to you about tonight. I want to get your opinion about that. Do you think, do you think that we can come together on the class issue, or do you think that the racial issue will cause a problem?
So the classical definition of class, if you want, is just where you place in production, right? It's where you place, either you work for somebody, you have somebody who works for you, or you invest in other people to do your work, or you kind of sit on dividends. So there are only a few different classes of people. Either you're a worker who has to take orders from a boss, you're a boss who issue orders, or you just invest in people and let them do all your bossing and working. And so class is supposed to designate the people based on their position in production, in jobs, in production in civil society. And that's not all production, because what class is a stay-at-home mom? You have to ask yourself. So if it's your place in production, we have to kind of think through what production means. But I have an anecdote that's actually going to go with this. But there's this idea that jobs are the only meaningful institutions in people's lives, right? Especially working class people, right? So if you hate your job, but your job is only one small aspect of your life, you really like your family, you really like your church, you really like, your kids playing baseball, you really like your status in the legal system, even if you're pro cop, You know, you really like all of those things. All of those things I mentioned, except maybe your working class existence, are white. Like all of those things are meaningful aspects of your life that are racialized and benefit like you disproportionately because you're white, right? So if jobs were necessarily the only, either had a monopoly over meaning over people's lives or were the most important part of their lives, then maybe we could come around class. But in the South, I mean, the only reason people work jobs and get money is to be over Black people, right? So like the only reason white people like do what they do, they make all this money to send their kids to private schools to not have to deal with the Negroes. Like we underestimate how much a middle class identity is working to avoid Black people. Ever since FDR, like that's why the Great New Deal, was racialized and it cut Black people out of.
I work to pay my bills and survive. That's okay. That's cool.
Social Security by cutting out domestic workers and farm workers, which were 75% of the Southern Black workforce and 60% of the nationwide Black workforce, because Southern white Democrats were populist right up until the resources and institutions were extended into like and included Black people, and they had to actually share power with Black people. They were like, no, I'd rather be poor. So there's this idea that there aren't other meaningful institutions in white people's lives other than their job, right? And for working class white people, their job is only one aspect of their identity. So,
and just for the record, I had the day off when this aired, so I watched it live, and I just remember it turned very like quick. Like it just turned up so quick, and I just started getting like, oh wow, this is getting intense. I just want to watch up until that build up, and that cut me off. And then we'll move on. But yeah, it gets up to a very intense feeling and emotions, and
we can come together.
Intense subject matter too.
On job issues, but that'll be overwhelmed when coming together on job issues jeopardizes your status and all of these other aspirations. And maybe you have your aspirations for your daughter to marry the boss's daughter. So like and then like I said, and then what about the people who are white but don't necessarily work a job, right? Like the stay-at-home white wives, the stay-at-home white women who aspire to not work, coming together. Like, have you ever heard one of them talk about unions? It's not pretty, right? So there's this whole idea of white womanhood who aspires to like not have a job, who's going to be really kind of crappy in the struggle. And so yeah, if jobs were if all meaningful activities ran through your job, then a working class coalition could be stable. But insofar as only one of a slew of mutually reinforcing institutions is your job, and all of your other institutions like benefit you from being racialized and give you a higher status in the racial hierarchy, then that's going to be a hard coalition to maintain with any stress, right? Because like they're going to get a different message from their pastor, a different message from their spouse, a different message from just about everybody else about like, and it's going to jeopardize all of the other aspects of their meaning. It's going to jeopardize their inheritance. Like when the revolution comes, we're going to have to take some of these inheritances, and a lot of your shop floor white roommates have like an uncle who did very well, and you know, some of these white inheritances, we're gonna have to start talking about like what a real wealth tax looks like. And some of them will be like, well, you know, I only make $12 an hour, but you know, my uncle, he's rich, and I don't want I might work for his property company once he expires. So are white people really willing to jeopardize their inheritances? And that's for the class struggle to move up from $12 to $20 an hour. Are they willing to jeopardize their $200,000 inheritance? Are their wives willing to do that? So what does that mean? And I think we need to be honest about all of these other meaningful activities. And the anecdote I wanted to show was I was doing some research on women's suffrage, and Utah apparently was like a leader in women's suffrage because with the plural wives, there were a lot of women who lived in Utah, and they wanted to get statehood. So and power.
Trying to read the top chat replay here, because that was where I was, you know, like again, I watched this live, so I was, you know, reading the chats and listening to the discussion, like the whole thing just, I don't know if it snowballed on me or what, but it became like a lot. I was like, holy crap, I got to walk away and start moving around. So I'm trying to read that and watch.
As a state, and so they pushed for, and they wanted to like seem as progressive. We're polygamous but progressive. So they pushed for women's suffrage earlier than was, than the nation was pushing for. And the Eastern suffragettes on the East Coast were like, this is great. What's going to happen is we're going to empower women, and women in Utah are going to throw off the polygamy, and they're going to be great allies for women's rights. And what happens when you empower women? They're going to throw off all these patriarchal bonds and be good allies. So if we empower women, they're just pretty much going to do what the church tells them to do, and it'll be cool. And so both were pro women's rights voting, but they thought radically different consequences would come from it. The women on the East Coast thought there'd be some sort of like sisterhood that would band against the evil men patriarchs who are holding them in polygamous marriage. The men in the church were like, well, the women like their marriages and they like their church, and they're going to do what we tell them to do. And what happened was the men in the church in Utah were right. And and so you just have to, like, this illusion that the bond that you care about is the only bond that matters, and in our case it's a working class bond, I think isn't taking seriously all of the other meaningful activities that depend on a racial hierarchy. So what'll happen is you get these white guys a raise by coming together in working class solidarity. First thing they'll do is like yank their kids out of your schools and send them to, and now they have enough money to move to white flight to a suburb, which they wanted to begin with. So a lot of these working class people you want to get with are really just like unaffectuated racists who don't have the money to be like real racists. And once they get money, they will like behave, like reinforce and calcify all the problems we had before. So I think you need the cultural offensive. You need to go after everything.
So I have a question about that, because I'm thinking about wealthy, like African Americans, and when we talk about the class issue, what I've often noticed, especially with Black celebrities, they end up being class loyalists first.
Yeah, well, yeah. How do you think they got? So the only civil rights, I got in trouble. The one segment that The Hill didn't air for me was after John Lewis died, and I went on like the day after John Lewis died, and I said, that Negro, and I went off on how he was just a tool for the Clintons. And even Bill Clinton admitted, thank you for being such a tool for me. And The Hill didn't air that segment, so I think that's too bad. But you have to understand that the Black civil rights leaders and the Black middle class isn't really middle class and Black people. They're middle class, like the rich Black people. They didn't get there by looking out for Black people. They got there by sucking up to white ass. And they got there. So expecting them to give up those habits is a little bit like it was never them. A lot of the best Black people, the best Black civil rights leaders died broke and young, and that's too bad. The ones that are left are the ones who the ones that are left are like, maybe not the best, right? So you just have to understand how people got their wealth. And if they got their wealth, and if you're Black and you got your wealth in these United States, the best job for Black people in the United States is doing dirt to other Black people. Like for the benefit of like white America. That's literally how Obama became a millionaire. Like he went on television and said, I am willing to neuter Black politics for 8 years, and while not giving them a dime. And the white liberals were like, that is a great idea. And they got their first Black president, the white liberals did. And he got rich, and Black people stayed broke and confused about why they're broke. And so he did his job, he got paid, and yeah, he's a class loyalist first, because like he was always that guy, and that's why he got paid.
And that's why I feel like if we all came together on the class issue, I think that's where we'd see the difference, because I don't think that wealthy African Americans would be on our side. And I say this because look at what happened with defunding the police. Look how many wealthy African Americans came out against defunding the police. And I mean, Will Smith, Morgan Freeman, anyone
they
that
won't
they
be on our
could
side.
use.
But like the thing is, they won't be on our side, and poor working class whites won't be on our side either. So like, we gotta come together. So there's a book by Rebecca Brookman just came out on massive resistance in Southern womanhood, and it was about the different ways that the different classes of white women fighting.
So the chat is starting to lean towards, I think I've seen him before. I think he gets a little crazy from time to time, and that kind of thing.
Segregation.
Starting to lean that way.
And she was like, look, just because someone's working class and white doesn't mean they both hate their white elitist boss and want to subordinate Black people. They can walk and chew gum at the same time. Like this illusion that working class whites don't, one, hate hate their white boss, and 2 don't want to take orders from you, Negro, is like it turns out they can hold both of these antipathies and be supported in both of these antipathies. So like I just unless there's a bigger cultural offensive, I think white people have too many other institutions. Working class white people have too many other institutions that tell them that it's cool. It's cool. It's cooler to be white. And if you're, like I said, if you're a young working class white woman, your plan B or plan A minus is to like land an asshole who makes real white guy money. So like the pool of people you actually you need in that struggle, like they just aren't incentivized to fight and jeopardize for the sake.
And her moderator just gave a language warning, like, you guys need to cool down the name calling. They get a little heated in this conversation.
Of black self-determination, because all of us are working, not all of us, but like the vast majority are working class. And then like the people like Will Smith and Morgan Freeman, they're not gonna fight white people, like on any level. Like they're not gonna fight. They're not like John Lewis. Like these guys are not gonna fight white people on any level. So that's not how they got money. That's not how they keep their money. That's just not their life.
But I would argue that Fred Hampton actually proved that we can work together along class lines, because Fred Hampton worked with the Young Patriots. I mean, then granted, he told them they had to denounce racism in order to work with him, but he showed us that you can bring working class people together, even though they're a different race. We
don't know how that was going to work. We don't know. We like, look, black people in Chicago are not doing so great right now, right? So it's not as if we have a proven model that worked. We had a promising campaign, possibly. But could it handle any stress? We don't know.
But I would argue that it was working though, and the federal government broke it up. The FBI saw that it was working, and that was the
possibility of working. Like, where are the tangibles? Like, what did it deliver?
There's videos. There's video evidence that shows that it was working, and that's why the FBI wanted to stop it.
Well, it had the possibility of working, but we don't. I think the coalition would have fallen apart. I think it would have fallen apart at some stress. If I needed to see, what I needed to see was an elected leader. Like, look, so Ford, he got concessions from whom? Hampton got concessions for his community due to his rainbow coalitions. Concessions from whom? Like, look, like I said, it'd be one thing if black people were like thriving in Chicago right now, but I spent a decade in Chicago. Like, the east side, the south side, not places you want to be. Like, that's just not great. It's just not. It's not some sort of black mecca. The model, the Black Panther model, had virtues insofar as it put together a way of thinking about community care that was a little bit different, but it was only going to be sustainable if it was taken up by the government. Like the Black Panther model, like you can't have charity neighborhood clinics that do all of the work of government, but like have none of the taxing and policing power of government. You can do it as a model to say like this little program works, but if you're actually serious about scaling it, and like actually like sustaining it, it can't be based on like mutual aid or charity. It has to actually be like legislatures like funding it and securing funding for real employees who do the work, and not just be based on volunteer. So like it allowed the expression of some, like the Black Panther model in general allowed the expression of some alternative ideas. And arguably the reason we have like neighborhood health clinics was because that model was like brought into existence on the experimental level in Oakland and in Chicago. But they're not, the neighborhood health clinics we have right now are government run, right? Because that's that's how like real resources are secured for at the community level. So the federal government was so worried about Fred Hampton that they killed him. That much is true. Would it have actually worked? Would those white people have really like held on to their anti-cop message for the sake of black self-determination? I don't think so. I'm not sure. I have my doubts.
Well, it's unfortunate because we don't know what would have happened, because they killed him. And then the Black Panthers also had infiltrators that the FBI put in as well. But the reason why we even have like free breakfast in some public schools is because of the Black Panthers, because they started doing those things. I think that if that organization would have continued to grow across the country, we could have been taking care of each other instead of hoping that the government would do it and take care of us. Because we even see today, the government's not really taking care of us.
The free breakfast you talk about that's in our schools right now isn't a volunteer program. That's a government program. Like that's like, so it was modeled on the Black Panther program and like a bunch of data that says it turns out when kids eat, they can pay attention in school better. And it was taken up by the government, funded by the government, but it wasn't like the model of like community mutual aid sustaining a universal program. That model like has always failed. Like that's the model the churches really want to believe works, but never actually secures power.
Well, do you think that the government model with the school system is working? Because I don't think that really works well. And the reason why I say that is because all it takes is for the state to cut funding. And they do this when they do cut funding from states I've lived in, and I've lived in South Carolina and North Carolina as well. Yeah. They tend to hit education first. And that's the first place where they tend to cut. And so then you look back and you have some of those programs that those.
And she was in the schooling system just recently, so she definitely notices that kind of thing. And will stand up for that kind of thing very quickly.
Schools had, I've watched the state just take those programs away. And that's the fear that I have about relying on the government to implement those educational programs. I just think you really need to rely on the people in your community, because at the end of the day, we should have each other's back instead of just hoping that the government will do the right thing. And then if they do, not take it away.
Well, I want us to take control of our public institutions, right? So the problem with relying on the people in your community, if you're Black, is the people in your community are stressed and broke, right? They have obligations and they're overtaxed on their own obligations, right? So like we're dealing with America's problem. Like what to do with descendants of slaves is an American problem. White nationalism and the superiority complex, that's an American problem. We're trying to turn an American problem and privatize that into making it a Black problem. And I think we need to deal with it as an American problem. And I like public schools for a few reasons. One, it's a shared institution where if we actually took the fight to the school boards, I think we could do actually really good work, and there would be real pushback, and I think we could shame the devil in an appropriate way and actually launch a cultural offensive, which is one of the reasons why I think the right takes critical race theory so seriously, is because like it's a vulnerability. It's actually a vulnerability. And if we kick some of these real estate agents out of the school board and put some of our people in, I think we would be in a better stead. And I wish that were the offensive, taking over school boards, taking over curriculums, and because I think that's how we kind of change the water. And if we change the water, other things become more palatable.
I do agree. I do think we need like more people on school boards. I have noticed that that's a big problem.
Yeah, well, it's all real estate agents right now. No, I think real estate agents should be just banned from school boards, because they make money off of segregation. If they can create a bad school district and create a good school district, they'll make their commission off of goosing the people with money who want to move into the good school district. Like diversity is bad for their bottom line. Like real estate agents don't want like evenly distributed, like poverty evenly distributed among the schools. They want good school districts where they can sell their houses that they want, and bad school districts where they can just scare the prospective buyers into moving into the expensive house where they get a bigger commission, right? So like real estate agents have all of the wrong incentives to be on a school board. Because they want to create pockets of excellence and pockets of degradation so that they could like charge a premium for the pockets of excellence. And so like we need to be honest about like what we need out of our public school system and the quality of education and teacher training and all of that, because teachers can't teach what teachers don't know. So we need to like take over those kinds of programs.
So yeah, I think that's a good segment of it. Again, Sabby Sabs, she does a great show, and it was an interview, so it wasn't meant to be a debate, but it was an interview in which they disagreed at one point and they agreed at one point, and I think it was more like they disagreed like 2/3 of the time when you watch the whole thing. So they got a little heated, and that 15-20 minute mark, the chat really went against him for a little while there. But as we expected, they're considered two opposite sides of the same idea, and you can have debate and you can disagree with people that you can still be friends with, you can still walk away with. You don't have to agree 100% of the time. So that was the first interview. Good interview. It got lost in the leftist world to a debate between two people who are not that important. No person should be elevated in this platform. So let's check out our Stony Progressive Takedown today. and then we will do the Jimmy Dore interview. But start out, this person got mentioned the other day in a video, so I figured we'd look at them. And so Marcia Fudge was the previous, before the special election, she was the previous incumbent in Nina Turner's area, and she is now in Biden's Secretary of Housing, Aid, and Urban Development. So she is now the Housing, Aid, and Urban Development head. She took over for Sleepy Carson there, Ben Carson, doing so much for brain surgery. I mean housing. Again, this was a district. If we can look back, come on here, speed. We look back at her elections. Her last election, she won 80.1 to 19.9. So it's just about getting through the primary in this region, and she won that primary without really any push. And the previous election, again, it's 82.2 to 17. So like, it's just completely a Democratic region. All you have to do is win the primary. And the year before that, nobody ran her on the primary. And then when you look back, she hasn't been primaried in quite a while. So that last primary was, the first one in a while. She wasn't really primaried much. She didn't have much competition. She just won a region that was extremely Democrat over and over again. So we go to Open Secrets and check her out. And she is worth $750,000, which isn't that much really, not at all. From Cleveland, supposedly. And so she's not poor, though. Like, she's definitely not, a working class person. Probably hasn't been for some time. Where did she get her money when she was running for election? So maybe where is this underground money possibly coming from? Because that is always where, when you look at a politician, is not what they're worth. It's where do they get their money? Where do they have maybe a $40 million Cayman Islands account from AT&T, maybe? AT&T? So that's always, when your first top 5 contributors are a company like that, it's not a good thing. The Teamsters Union, American Assistance for Justice, International Brother of Electrodes. So union. So the union bosses, or is that union group donations? But the big AT&T is never a good sign. So that area, that region, has been dominated by lawyer firms, public sector firms, real estate development, and that was what the new constituent is run by. She was completely set up. Yeah, man, that never happens now. It was completely set up with real estate, but she is an AT&T and union is her top thing here. And then if you dig down, you'll always find one of the big ones, and today's Walmart and McDonald's. So those are always good donations when you get big money from a couple of companies like that never shows anything down in the future, that maybe they donate a little now, but they'll give you some big chunks when you get out if you do the right things. Because things don't work like that in Congress at all. And if you don't know sarcasm, that was my attempt. So let's give her a look over with Senator Kristen Sinema, who I'll look up when she's a great name there. She's a corporate stooge, if any.
Housing. So whether we're talking about traditional manufactured housing or the growth of tiny homes, it's clear that these products are going to play an important role in satisfying consumer demand and providing affordable choices. So what role do you believe that manufactured housing plays in addressing ongoing housing supply challenges? And how can we work collaboratively to provide more safe, high quality, affordable choices to prospective homeowners?
I had an opportunity just on last week to have a meeting with the home builders, and they have talked about the fact that lumber alone has gone up more than 200% since COVID began. We know that the cost of trying to build a single family house today, based upon lumber costs, et cetera, has gone up more than $32,000. So the things that we are trying to do with resources like low-income housing tax credits, like home that can assist with bridging the gap between the cost of housing and making it more affordable for people to purchase. We have put in place a new tax credit as well. So those are things that have been considered within the jobs package. And I just do.
So you're going to give tax breaks to super rich people to create homes for people that can afford to live places. That doesn't exactly sound like you're doing anything for us. I mean, if I'm calling my bullshit meter, that's what it sounds like to me. I don't know you guys, that just sounds like she's trying to raise on platforms and give tax breaks.
I say to you that manufacturing homes is an option that we too seldom look at. It is affordable, it is resilient, it is energy efficient, and it is something that we should do more and more of, because I think that it is quick to make sure that we can put in place. So it's fast to put in place, and it's just a good option, as are tiny homes and others. But I think the real issue becomes, how do we make whatever the product is more affordable by the use of private investments, especially by way of tax credits?
Yes,
I agree.
Especially by tax credits, because that was probably what you were told.
As Democrats work to reach an agreement on...
I don't need to go where they're going. Don't need to go there. I found this little gem, so why not, right? I mean, let's get 2 for 1 here and get Marcia Fudge and Jen Psaki in a few-minute segment. Can't get better than that, right? So what? I don't understand that.
Great guest today. Joining us today is our new Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Marcia Fudge, who was confirmed just last week. We wasted no time. As you all know, Secretary Fudge served as U.S. Representative for the 11th Congressional District of Ohio for more than...
And her 12th biggest donor was real estate developments. Her big backstreet donors are, law firms and unions. So I'm sure she's all for like construction unions. I'm sure she's all for ownership in private companies. I highly doubt she's actually for us.
12 years. She's a former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus and earned a reputation of tackling the unique challenges of her district by working across political ideologies. In 1999, Secretary Fudge was elected the first female and first African-American mayor of Warrensville Heights, Ohio, a position she held for 2 terms. As mayor of Warrensville Heights, she adopted one of the first vacant and abandoned property ordinances in the state. Additionally, she brought new residential development to the city and addressed the city's growing foreclosure crisis through the formation of a long partnership that helped residents maintain the financial security needed to buy or keep a home. As Secretary Fudge has said, her first priority as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development is to alleviate the housing crisis and get people the support they need to come back from the edge. She's happy to take a couple of questions after she gives some remarks. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you very much, Jen. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh, thank you. I was wondering if I was in this room by myself. Jen, thanks for inviting me to speak about the importance of the American Rescue Plan as it
Power play, absolute power play right off the bat. That's funny.
Relates to the urgent needs, housing needs facing our nation today. What a way to complete my very first week as Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. At HUD, we know firsthand the severe impact of COVID-19 on our nation's housing crisis. HUD staff in every region of the country have worked tirelessly to assist grantees and recipients of HUD assistance in their response to the pandemic. We've helped housing owners, housing authorities, and communities provide additional rental assistance and support new efforts to eradicate homelessness. We've extended the Federal Housing Administration's
Have we though? Because I feel like there's literally things that we can do that we can eradicate homeless in like a year. I mean, there's so many empty buildings, empty properties, empty houses, empty everything all around. We don't have to reconstruct shit. We could probably get eradicated, I mean, within a year, if we wanted to, if that was an actual goal. We have the money, resources, we have everything. I don't think we're trying at all.
Closure and eviction moratoriums until June 30th to support the immediate and ongoing needs of homeowners. Under the Biden-Harris administration, HUD is making greater efforts to keep Americans safe from COVID-19. We're strengthening partnerships between recipients of HUD assistance and public health agencies and healthcare providers. Many of the people living in federally assisted housing have risk factors that make them particularly vulnerable to COVID. These factors include disability, race and low income, along with racial and ethnic disparities in access to.
Does she have to read this because she doesn't actually believe it? Because that weird designer shirt she has, and I mean, does she? Yeah, I mean, she's worth $750,000 on paper. Again, when you're in Congress like that, if you're worth $750,000, you're probably worth a handful of million.
Response, care, and treatment. We're making sure that federal, state, and local efforts to reach those most at risk of COVID are linking those efforts to people living in housing HUD supports. The American Rescue Plan is critical to our success in these efforts. Some of you may know that my last vote as a member of Congress was for the American Rescue Plan. I was proud to vote for this historic legislation to get help to the American people during this moment of great challenge. I thank President Biden for the leadership that has gotten us to this point. The American people can be confident that help is here. The President has described the American Rescue Plan as shots in arms and money in pockets. I would add, it relates to housing. The American Rescue Plan keeps people housed and brings people home. And with that, I would take any questions that Jen is going to allow me to take. So y'all make
anytime.
Jen is in charge. I'm just here.
Go ahead.
If I can, Secretary Fudge, thank you for being here. We appreciate your time today. The head of the National Housing Conference said that HUD's ranks have been gutted, morale has never been lower, and the challenges to HUD's constituents have never been higher. Just in simple terms, can you describe the state of your department as you take it over today?
Well, I would say this to you, and I actually had the opportunity to talk to the President about it since I've been here. We are thousands of people short of where we ought to be. Our staff is outstanding. They are under-resourced, understaffed, and overworked. But we are going to make some major changes and very quickly. The rescue plan is allowing us to.
This is the only one I could find, so there's no like new press briefing where she like announced all these amazing changes and stuff. This is her introduction, and this was it. This is the only one I could find. Most recent and only.
To do things that we may not have been able to do without it. So I'm especially pleased that the President had the foresight and the vision to give us a historic, maybe one-time opportunity to change what is going on in housing in this country.
You put out some new numbers today as they relate to homelessness in this country right now. Obviously, it's a number that the whole country is dissatisfied by. Thinks the number should be much lower.
Thank
God. I'll ask this in two different ways. One, can you set a goal where you think that number should be, and in what time frame you think you can meet such a goal to reduce homelessness in this country, and specifically for some of the blue parts of the country that some Republicans have criticized, San Francisco, New York, where the homeless numbers have been high. What specific advice and what you can specifically do to target those communities to alleviate those high numbers?
Well, the first thing I say is that the President gave us a charge early on as to what he wanted us to focus on.
Homelessness is not a partisan issue. There's tons of homelessness here in Florida. It's not a red state, blue state issue. It happens in Miami and Tampa too. So I don't know. Why do people make shit a red-blue issue when it's not a red-blue issue? It's just a human issue that we need to take care of. Stop making things partisan. It doesn't have to be.
Especially in the first 100 days. Homelessness was at the top of the list. One was expanding vouchers. Thirdly, he wanted us to find ways to expand and put in the market new affordable housing. So with the $40 billion that we have now, what we expect is this. We have $5 billion set aside to do nothing but address homeless issues. So we know that with those resources, over the next probably 12 to 18 months, we know for a fact that we can get as many as 130,000 people off the streets. We also know that our local partners are going to assist us in finding other rental opportunities. So we believe we can put a major dent in it. But if nothing else, what we will let them know is that there is an opportunity to find a way off the streets. We have more programs in place to assist people who are already in public housing to find a way to buy housing. We know that affordable housing is a problem all across this country. I don't know where my Republican colleagues live that don't think that there is a problem, but there is. So many of us just choose to ignore it.
Mary? Thank you.
I like that emotion. I'll give her that. I mean, she is from a poor city. She should have emotion about this issue. Cleveland has a lot of freaking issues. So I hope she is upset by this. Maybe she was a good choice for Biden, but she does seem to have some money in her background with politics climbing. So you always got a question, right? You don't have to agree with somebody every time. If I can agree with her 30% of the time, it's not great. But at least I'm glad she got emoted by that. That is a solid response. And give respect when respect's due. That was, when in any of these debates and stuff, when people just ignore, like, hey, you know what, I can agree with you in a subject, say it. Say I can agree with you. Don't push through it and then move on to something you can get heated about. Say, hey, you know what, I can concede. We agree there. Good for us. It's so aggravating. You can agree with people. It's okay. But some people have to feel they cannot agree with anybody anytime. And I want to finish tonight's stream off with the majority of, I am going to finish with a comedy clip, of course, but I'm going to finish the second half with just one thing and one thing alone. I want to do the Jimmy Dore, Tucker Carlson interview. I have not watched it yet. I've been holding off, and I feel like it is now so long I just kind of almost missed it, but it's going to be a reaction video. Let's burn one of these CBD joints down, because that's a good way to get reactions. And make sure I have it all set up here. And we will do a Jimmy Dore Tucker Carlson, I don't know, it was like a Saturday, Sunday show. I don't know what it is. I really don't pay attention to anything mainstream media. And I don't know how much of this I can play on mainstream media before it takes me down. So I will have to stop and talk quite a bit, or else it'll probably throttle me. So sorry if I'm not going to play straight through, but we can get it started at least.
And today, from the beginning of our nighttime show on Fox News, we've tried to invite on people with whom we disagree on a bunch of things, but where we agree on some really important things, where there's a meaningful union set of belief. We do this for two reasons. One, to show that partisanship is mostly an illusion designed to control you. The team sport of politics is a lie. They're not on your team. And the second reason is because it's super interesting, and it reminds us of our common humanity, and you learn things when you talk to people you don't agree with on everything. It expands you as a person.
Hey, look at that. I agree with Tucker Carlson. Write it down. Don't write it down, actually. Don't write it down. Please don't write it down. But I do agree with him on that.
And what's the fun of living if you...
Literally what I said, going into this blind freaking, this completely reactionary thing, is I just said that, and then I started this. I literally haven't listened. I had it on mute when I freaking clicked on the link to make sure I got through any commercials, and then it stopped and played, and it'll probably play commercials, and we'll just mute and chat for a minute.
You can't do that. The problem is a lot of people with whom we disagree on some issues can't come on because it gets so viciously attacked when they do. You're a white supremacist. You did that show. That's another means of control, obviously. So we're always grateful for the ones who do, and Jimmy Dore is definitely in that category. He is first and foremost a comedian. He's also, I think, a deeply incisive political commentator. He's hosted the Jimmy Dore Show, which streams on YouTube, and we're happy to have him in our studio now. Jimmy Dore, thanks so much for coming on.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. I just like to tell people who get upset at me for when I do your show, it's like, well, you shouldn't be upset that I'm doing Tucker's show. You should be thankful that Tucker brings me on to bring my anti-war message and my free speech and defense of Julian Assange to half the country. When you see me on Tucker Carlson, it should make you upset that I'm not on Chris Cuomo's show or Rachel Maddow's show or fake tough guy Lawrence O'Donnell's show. That's what it should trigger you, but they don't. They get triggered that I'm on your show, which is ridiculous. And it shows that they haven't thought it through. And, you know, when people say that they want to organize along class lines, they don't understand what they mean when they say that. Class lines means
everybody. It means Trump voters. It means everybody in your class. It doesn't mean half the country class. It means the entire country class. And that's what people don't understand. And that's how we have to organize now. And as soon as you do that, Tucker, you will be pilloried.
Playing at 1 1/4 helps me not get throttled by the system and go into streaming. So go into buffering. Sorry.
I interviewed someone on the other side of the aisle, and they came for me because they can't have people on the populist left and the populist right coming together to go against oligarchy, the military-industrial complex, and Wall Street. They can't have that.
Well, that is totally true. And I didn't even grow up in that class. And I believe in that completely, that people's fundamental interests are probably economic, actually.
Yes.
And a lot of this stuff is a diversion designed to prevent you from knowing that. You actually are from a working class background. Describe where you came from.
All right, so I grew up on the southwest side of Chicago in a really blue-collar neighborhood, I would say Navy blue-collar. And my dad was a cop, and I was the youngest boy, 12 kids.
12 kids?
Yeah, and so we were Catholic, of course.
You think?
And I went to Catholic school, so my parents made sure they put us through Catholic school and all that stuff, so I got a good education that way. I also got, the crap beat out of me every day too, but that's another thing. It made me who I am. So I grew up that way, and I got.
Why did you get beaten up?
Because if you grow up poor people beat the hell out of each other, right? So I would go to school, Catholic school, where they would beat you at Catholic school, right? And then we'd come home and our parents would beat us at home, and then we'd go to the park and beat other people. And that's just how it works.
The circle of beating?
I hated getting hit as a kid, and I do a bit in my act about it. And now when someone hits their kid as a grown-up, I never know when you're supposed to step in, you know? And one time I was in an airport, and this lady's hitting her kid, he's like 5 years old, and she's just wailing on him. And finally go, hey, why don't you cut it out? You're creeping everybody out, And she goes, no, you have to hit them, make some good people. And I was like, well, how many punches would it take to make you a decent human being?
What did she say?
Turns out 80. Anyway, no, I have a brother who hits his kid. And I go, don't you remember how much you hated getting hit? And he said, oh, I never hit him if I'm angry. Of course you're angry. What are you, a Nazi? You have to be angry to hit somebody. Who is sitting around laughing their ass off? Oh, I can't wait to hit my kid now. I'm in such a good mood. Anyway.
How did he respond?
So that's why, they laughed, my brothers, but so that's how I grew up. I grew up in that kind of a neighborhood. I didn't really have any role models that did anything I wanted to do.
What did the people around you do, the men in your neighborhood do?
So the cops, firemen, or criminals,
yeah,
basically. And so that was it. And I even took the police.
Or all three. Could be all three. I think that is very possible. At least 2 of the 3 is very possible. Specifically 2 out of the 3.
Police test. That's how far it went. My dad, I was in college, right? I had gotten in college, and I was home for the weekend or something, and my dad, it was in the summer, and my dad woke me and my other 2 brothers up and goes, get up, you're going to take the police test. And I was like, what? He's like, you have to go take the police test. And I go, Dad, I'm in college. Can't you wait for me to screw up first? But he made me take it. And anyway, so I didn't become a cop.
How'd you do in the police test?
So this is interesting. They never gave me my score. Yeah. And I don't know exactly why, but they didn't give me, I think it was if you scored too high, they didn't want you, or that's what I tell myself anyway.
You're just too smart to be a Chicago police
officer.
I was
too smart.
Of the 12 kids, how many became cops?
So my oldest brother, Phil, so my dad's Phil, he was a cop. My grandpa, Phil, he was a cop. My oldest brother, Phil, he was a cop. And, but then he's-
All Phil Doors.
All Phil Doors, yeah. So, and then my oldest brother, he quit being a cop and then he went into business for himself. But, so yeah, so that. But a lot of my best friends in Chicago were cops, state cops, Chicago police cops. And so
what kind of life is that?
So I know cops. They enjoy it. I didn't. Yeah. I wouldn't want any part of that. My dad he drove a paddy wagon his whole life. And, he didn't really, I don't think he ever pulled his gun. He wasn't the kind of guy who went looking for trouble. You know what I mean? My dad wasn't gung-ho. He was the kind of guy who got that job because he had kids and he needed to have health insurance and stuff like that. He wasn't like, let's go mess some people up. He wasn't on steroids.
Did you know your grandfather?
Yeah, I knew him. He died when I was, I think, in 3rd grade, 2nd or 3rd grade. He was an Irish guy, drinker, and a cop, and he died right after he retired. And so that's when my dad, I think, was afraid he was going to die after he retired. So my dad retired when he was 57. So he worked 2 jobs his whole life. He was a cop and a tuck pointer, which is brickwork, and that's what I did with him. So my dad had his own little company, and we would do brickwork during the day in the spring, summer, and fall. And if you ever want to ruin a relationship, go to do brickwork with your father 8 hours a day.
I can imagine. As you're talking, one of 12 kids grew up in the city of Chicago, son of a cop, grandson of a cop, brother of a cop. I'm thinking it's almost like a cliche. But then I realize I don't know if that world exists anymore.
I don't know what you mean when you say that.
I don't know what he's talking about. It definitely exists. Absolutely exists. I'm not sure what world he exists in, but that's still much a thing. There's still definitely those circles.
that world.
I'm not sure what I mean either. But you're telling a story that seems like very American and familiar. But I don't know if it still is. Is your neighborhood the same as it was?
You know, when I go back, it seems the same. It really. So I don't know if in my neighborhood was very interesting because they started to do public housing, right? And so they would do scattered site housing, right? Before in Chicago, the original Mayor Daley's idea was you put all the poor people in one place, put them in a big tower.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the worst idea.
Cabrini Green.
Right, yes, that was the worst idea. Even when you have college kids in huge towers, they wreck the place.
Not a good
They don't
idea.
want to do that, right? And so they started to do this thing called scattered site housing, where they would put public housing in every neighborhood around the city, and it came right in our neighborhood. Of course, they didn't put it in every neighborhood. They put it in our neighborhood, and that created racial tensions. And so I grew up in there was a dividing line, and the blacks lived on that side, and the whites lived on this side, and you weren't supposed to go across. But then eventually we did. We organized football games against each other, and we kind of got to know each other. It wasn't like, kumbaya, but it was kind of interesting that we did that. And we could actually have football games and we wouldn't fight each other. And so that kind of informed me growing up. And there was a lot of people who were like, you better not sell your house to a black person, right? That was a big deal. And I was like, people just say that out loud, Now, in my neighborhood, so we had 10 kids and then we adopted two, a Puerto Rican and a Mexican in my house, right? And so I didn't grow up racist at all, right? I mean,
by definition.
Right, but and it was.
Why did your parents do that? They already had 10 kids.
I don't know. I had a theory. My theory is when I went to school, my mom got lonely. I was in school all day. All her kids were at school all day. She didn't know what to do all day. She liked babies. My mom wanted a baby. Another baby. So she went to Catholic Charities, and she said, I want a baby. And they said, well, we don't have any babies, but we have this kid, if you'd like this boy. He's in 3rd grade. And my mom said, sure. And so she brings home, so we have a guy, another boy older than me. I don't need another older brother to beat the hell out of me. And he was a badass, tough guy too. And he did beat the hell out of me. And so it worked though. My mom was like, I thought if we got a boy, it would put me in good graces and I would get a baby. She got a baby. She had a baby that Christmas. And
she sounds like a pretty unbelievable person.
She was, in a lot of ways, my mother was. And she got the baby. Then I got to have a little sister, which I really enjoyed. I having a little younger sibling. I really enjoyed having a little sister. Now my little sister has triplets. And so it was great. It was really, I was happy.
So you're still close to her?
I was happy. Yeah, I love my sister.
Oh, that's a cool story.
Yeah, I was really happy. And it's funny. I remember when Mom said, hey, we're going to get a baby. And I didn't want one because I didn't want competition. And I was like, I don't want a baby. No more. Let's have a vote. And Dad's vote counts for 2. I remember I said that because I knew he didn't want another baby. But we got him, and I loved her. I loved it. It was great.
Yeah, Mom's vote counts for more than all the other votes.
Yeah, so that's how I grew up. And I went to Catholic school. All my other siblings went to public school, but for some reason I went to Catholic high school, right? I was the only one who went to Catholic high school. We all went to Catholic grammar school. And then Catholic high school, I went to St. Lawrence on the southwest side of Chicago.
Is it still there?
Yeah. And they were a football powerhouse when I got there, so I kind of knew who they were. But and it was all boys school. Yeah,
So then you went away for college.
Yeah.
I went to college. So I'm not really a student. You know that, right? So the way I picked my college, I went to Illinois State. Everybody in my neighborhood would go to Northern. And the reason I went to Illinois State was because my best friend Mike was going there and he had a car. And I was like, I want to have a car when I go there. So anyway, I only went there for 3 years and then I dropped out. And I went to Columbia College in Chicago. It was just more of an art school. And I was going to go into advertising. And when I got out of college, I just started doing stand-up comedy. And they started paying me right away. And I was like, this is unbelievable. So I never got a job.
I want to ask about that in 2 seconds, but you said at the outset that you've come on our show and people complain and you say, well, but CNN and MSNBC won't have me. And I'm thinking as I hear how you grew up, that there's probably not a single person at any level at either one of those networks who grew up close to the way you did.
No. And so whenever
that's a massive cultural divide, what you just described. And I've worked at both those channels, so I just know there's nobody who grew up like that.
So I happened to be on some kind of panel in San Francisco a couple of years ago with all these news types. Some Emmy Award-winning guy was hosting this panel and I was on it. And
that is very true. Just so you guys know, most people in mainstream media grew up in an elite family, and that's why they get those jobs. They don't hire somebody because of amazing journalism, work and integrity and hard work and anything like that. They hire people that are in a big name family that'll get paid. They can give them a cush amount, and you just have to be kind of pretty and be able to speak. That's it.
And I was saying, the reason, like he was asking what my success, what I attributed to, and I attributed to the fact that everybody's pro-war at all the major stations, at every newspaper, they're always for everywhere. And he's like, Jimmy, I don't know what you think we talk about in our editorial meetings, but we don't all talk like that. You think, and I said, I don't know what you guys talk like in your editorial meetings either. You know why? Because I'll never be invited into one of those editorial meetings, whereas you have been groomed to be in that meeting since you were in kindergarten and you don't even know it.
Yeah, exactly.
Because anytime you color outside the lines, that moves you a little farther outside that circle. And I've been coloring outside the lines ever since I was in kindergarten. And so I'm never going to get invited to that editorial meeting. And so now I am on the outside, and I can tell you that I'm a real outsider when it comes to journalism. So I can really call them out, which is why I have such powerful enemies inside journalism.
You do. I've noticed. I want to get to comedy. So 1989, which suddenly is a long time ago.
Yeah.
You decide to go into comedy.
Yeah.
Why?
Well, first of all, I always wanted to be a comedian, but I didn't know I could. Like George Carlin was my hero.
Yeah.
And I didn't think I had the talent to do that. That just seemed otherworldly to me. And then I saw TV shows. They had all these cable stand-up shows, and some of those guys really sucked. And I'm like, well, I'm not as funny as George Carlin, but I'm funnier than that guy, and he's on TV. So I bet I could do this, right? I bet I could do it. I won't be the best, but I'll be one of them. And so I was right.
That's a very... I like that standard. I often feel the same way. I'm not a genius, but
I'm better than that.
I know I'm smarter than that guy.
Yeah, and so that was that. And I started doing comedy, and it was back in the boom, so it was 1989. Clubs were opening everywhere, and lines around the block to get in. And I got to work with all my heroes, and it was just amazing. And it was an amazing time. And then 4 years later, everything went south. Comedy clubs started closing. They started cutting your money. And so that's when I moved to Los Angeles. I saw the writing on the wall, and I moved to Los Angeles to try to get on television, and it worked.
Were you political then?
No. I mean, I saw this guy named Bill Hicks. I don't know if you ever heard of him.
Oh, of course.
Okay, good.
The best comic. So he's the best comedian ever. That's what Jimmy's saying right now as I react, saying the best comic. The best. So good. That's like, Hicks, Mitch Hedberg, Lee Camp, Jimmy Dore. Huh?
So he's the best comedian
George
ever.
Carlin.
Yeah, died at 32, I think.
Very young. And pancreatic cancer, I think, is what got him. And so I was pretty cocky. I was like, I know what I'm doing in this comedy business. I know how to do this. Every time I get on stage, I'm like, wait till they get a load of me. And then I saw Bill Hicks, and like in the first 5-10 minutes I was watching, I was like, I started to get depressed. And then at 15 minutes in, I started drinking. And then after I saw him, I just wanted to quit, because I know for the rest of my life I would forever be chasing second place. I would never come close to.
So many professional comedians, guys work at the Comedy Store like you, talk about Bill Hicks. What was it about Bill Hicks that made him so remarkable?
He can, he can make concepts funny. He had these, he was a philosopher that was able to cut through and see things, and he could be blunt and hilarious and he had the perfect blend of everything. And he was an amazing performer. He was an amazing mimic. He just had so much talent. And, he was an alcoholic for a while. Then he got sober. I saw him when he got sober. So I didn't see when he was drunk and stuff like that. And I only saw him sober when he was on his game. And there's just nobody, I just knew it. I just like, for the rest of my life, I'm going to be chasing second place. And it depressed me. And it really did. And then thank God he died like a couple years later. And I was able to be number one again.
Oh God, that's dark. So you've made a living more or less at comedy for more than 30 years.
Yeah. Yes.
So you know the business really well.
Yeah.
What happened to it?
So, well, in the early 90s, so it went down in the mid 90s because it just got oversaturated. It was on every television show. They would book stand-up comics on airplanes. That's what they wanted.
Physically?
Physically, you were going to stand up and do. I remember hearing about it. People did it. Then, of course, it didn't work. And so it just got oversaturated, and people left, and they would have to give people free tickets to come to comedy clubs, right? And that worked for a little while too. And so then this thing called alternative comedy started in Los Angeles. I think that's where it started. That's where I live. And it was a place called Largo, and it was like people like Janine Garofalo and David Cross and those types, right? And it wasn't formulaic comedy. Like you would kind of speak extemporaneously, talk about your day. So it was more real, and people enjoyed that. And the knock on it wasn't funny enough, right? Because it wasn't rehearsed and stuff. But now I think that really opened up what comedy became, and then podcasts. Is what then gave another boom to comedy, right? So then people were able to find their favorite comedians and connect with them in a real way, and then they could sell tickets and people. And for me, YouTube has just been an unbelievable boon for me. Like I said, I was telling you before, I was on ABC, NBC, I was on NBC at least 5-6 times doing stand-up comedy, CBS, ABC, Comedy Central specials. Mine was chosen Best of the Year by iTunes, thank you. And it still didn't sell a ticket, And then I started doing my Jimmy Dore show on YouTube, and immediately I started selling out theaters.
So comedians, by definition, are outsiders. They're the people we give license to tell the truth. And all of a sudden, there's been this weird inversion where it's almost like we have court comedians who seem to exist to help the regime do whatever the regime wants to do. So, that's a very weird development, no?
So I like being an outsider. That's what comedians are supposed to do. That's what we're supposed to be. But I see now, because of Trump, comedians became establishment hacks, and they're conformists. No matter what the issue is, they're pushing the Democratic Party line as if that's some kind of way to stand up against fascism. And they don't realize that the Democratic Party is owned by the same.
I think Tucker was talking about a few of just a handful of those who were like on the shows and such that are actually paid by corporations like The Daily Show or Bill Maher, or, what any of those kind of bigger, like almost comedy, but not any comedy anymore. I would call it those people do comedy, but he's calling them up, and then Jimmy takes it a different way.
People, and that it's really a one-party rule, and that this is ridiculous. So I like the idea that I'm an outsider, and I'm a real outsider when it comes to journalism, because I'm not looking for a job in journalism. I'm not looking to make friends in journalism. And so consequently, it gives me the freedom to do and say whatever I want. And it turns out when you do that, creates a lot of controversy. When you tell the truth about things, like when you call other journalists out for their McCarthy smears, that causes a big wave of controversy.
So you were on a program called The Young Turks.
Right.
For how long?
So I started working with them, I think somewhere around 2009, maybe 2010.
And
somewhere around
you
there.
went for 10 years-ish.
Ish. I think I left early 2019 maybe, but what happened was after Hillary.
Yeah, he got pushed out after 2016, slowly and surely. So he was full-time maybe 5 years. I think they are going to gloss over that, it looks like. I haven't watched this. It looks like they're going to gloss over that.
Clinton got elected. Like, I couldn't vote for Hillary, right? Because I said I'm not going to vote for warmongering corporatists anymore, and we have to draw a line in the sand, and this is the sand line I'm going to draw. And so I became, there wasn't a good. They didn't want to put that face out there, so they put me behind a paywall, and they took me off their Friday panels, and I kept doing my work, and I thought, well, as soon as the Mueller report comes in, they're going to stop doing this, and we'll get back to being a news show again. Well, they didn't. They just went even crazier. So I left. And I started doing this thing called Force to Vote, which in the middle of the pandemic, the idea was, let's have the squad, the progressives that just got elected, that we all just helped get elected, let's have them withhold their vote for Nancy Pelosi as speaker, because the Democrats have a majority, but it's a slight majority, right? And so now they have the power. Now Nancy Pelosi can't get elected without the votes from the squad. So the idea was, well, everybody for a generation has agreed on getting a vote on Medicare for all on the floor, on the left anyway.
Yeah.
And so I said, this is a perfect opportunity. Say, hey, Nancy, you don't have our vote unless you promise to give us a vote for Medicare for all on the floor. Well, that revealed that there is no left in America, because the squad wouldn't do it. They're not going to oppose Nancy Pelosi, even though they all ran on it. And so what I'm
Whoop, didn't mean to do that. Sorry.
The idea that we have progressives inside the Democratic Party, it's actually more deleterious to the progressive movement to have them there. Why is that, Jimmy? Because it gives people a false impression that there's somebody in government fighting for you, that there's one of the parties that are kind of on your side, and they aren't. And the quicker people realize that both parties are not on their side, they only serve the oligarchy. We are, in fact, in an oligarchy. Your democracy was stolen way before Trump. Until that happens, we won't ever have real change.
But what about Ocasio-Cortez? She's on Instagram.
Ocasio-Cortez campaigned on a floor vote on Medicare for all. And she campaigned on creating what she called a ruckus, meaning you have to stop being polite. This is a quote. You have to stop being polite. We tried being polite, and it got us nowhere. And it wasn't until we started acting out and speaking impolitely that we even created the circumstances for change. That's what she tweeted. So I'm just doing what she said. So I started to put heat on people like AOC and Rashid Tlaib and Ro Khanna and all the Justice Democrats in the squad to force the vote. And they said I was committing violence against them with my words. That's how scared they got.
Were you?
That's how scared. You really telling them to do what they ran on? That's violence? That's how afraid they were. And all the things. So they had people write hit pieces on me in the New York Magazine, Newsweek, BuzzFeed. They tried to shut me down and squelch me. They made me trend on Twitter negatively, but they couldn't shut me up. And they couldn't stop me. And they don't know what to do with me. Because again, all the usual, they have Wikipedia putting smears on me that I can't get rid of. CNN's calling me. It's unbelievable what's going on. Just a comedian, a pothead comedian in his garage, what you can do when you want to tell the truth inside journalism and politics, and you can create a ruckus. And I did. And so now everybody sees that those people are fakers and they're corrupt. And the reason why I say they're corrupt is not because they take corporate money and do the bidding of corporations, but they're doing the bidding of their own career, right? Their own self-dealing.
Yeah.
So if I go along with the establishment, I'm going to get a book deal, I'm going to get speaking fees, and I'm going to be in Congress for at least 5 years, and then I get a pension for the rest of my life. That is corrupt. And
whenever I'm doing the Stony Progressive takedown, that's what I'm always mentioning. When they get medium-sized checks, they're big checks promised along the way if they do the bidding right. That's why they get the medium checks. That's why they get the donations. You don't get $20,000 from Walmart because they think you're super swell and that 20 grand might help out a little bit. No, there's big numbers promised along the way.
That's why they're not pushing back, because Nancy Pelosi could come in and crush you. Hey, we'll fund somebody in a primary to your left, just like she did to Joe Crowley, AOC, right? So that's what they're all afraid of. They're afraid of the power of the establishment taking away what little power and that they have in Congress. And so they're corrupted. And so I think people are seeing, they said, oh, we can't do forced to vote, Tucker, because we're going to push for $15 minimum wage. And we have to keep our powder dry so we can push for $15 minimum wage, which Joe Biden ran on. So Joe Biden gets elected. They have a majority. They don't push for $15 minimum wage or Medicare for all or get student loan default. No, they do nothing. They're doing nothing. It got revealed through forced to vote, and now the Democratic Party hates my guts.
Have they called you a racist yet?
Yes, they called me everything.
Oh, have they really?
Oh, yeah, I interviewed a Boogaloo boy, right? And so, which I didn't know anything about the Boogaloo boys.
I don't either.
I didn't know anything about, I thought they were like the Proud Boys, right? So I have this guy on, and he explains to me that the Boogaloo Boys were invented as a response to the Proud Boys. And they thought the Proud Boys were racist and they were pro-cop and pro-war, and the Boogaloo Boys were anti-cop, anti-Trump, anti-Republican Party, and they were pro-LGBTQ and pro-Black Lives Matter. In fact, he said, we give security for Black Lives Matter protests. And I was like, get out of here. I don't really believe that. Well, there's video I've been shown since that they actually did. But the problem is the Boogaloo Boys, they're not a centralized organization. So in the Northeast, they're different. In the Midwest, they're different. And so there's different groups.
And they're pro-gun.
And they're very pro-gun. And so I'm sitting there having a conversation with this guy, and we agree on like 5 out of 10 issues. We agree on 5 of them. I'm like, well, why can't we work on those 5 things? And they're like, no, you're a racist. You're platforming a white nationalist. You're a blah, blah. And I told you the next guy so I interviewed him, and the next guy that came on my show was this socialist. He's a guy from the World Socialist website.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to come on and talk about a strike nobody was covering. And he wanted to talk about how bad I was for having that Boogaloo boy on. And I said, yeah, but I know I used to think those things too, but did you hear what he said? He said the opposite. He goes, I go, what is your message? I go, no, you're supposed to be an organizer, a union organizer. I go, what is your message for a guy like that? A guy who's being crushed by capitalism, a guy who's anti-imperialism, a guy who's anti-political parties. What is your message for a guy like that? He goes, I don't have a message for him. I go, well, that's why nobody ever heard of you. Because that's not how organizing works. So I've been in unions all my life. You don't go to the shop floor and go, hey, who here is a Boogaloo boy? You're out. Who here is a Proud Boy? You're out. Who here is a libertarian? You're out. Who's a gun nut? You're out. Who's a Trumper? You're out. Okay, who's left? Now we're going to organize against the man together. That's not how it works, right? When you organize along class lines, you organize along class lines around a central idea, and it's always economic, and you're screwing me. And so
we all just need to get together for like 5 issues that we can all agree on. It's so simple. I mean, most agree on. Some are hypnotized and zombies, so they don't know what the heck's going on anyway.
It's always economic. So that's actually why you came to my attention, because you were interested in economics and foreign policy. And the conversation on the left revolves almost exclusively around identity, which is, in other words, me. Narcissism is about me.
Yeah.
But you kept talking about economics. That used to be the central conversation on the left, or in America, actually.
Yeah.
Why no more?
Because the establishment has learned how to co-opt identity politics to put the brakes on economic progress and justice. So the joke I do, so if you want to help, I would say if you want to help Black people, nothing would help them more than free college, student loan relief, and Medicare for all, and a living wage. You want to help them?
There's 4. I just said 5. There's 4. Bam. He just came up with 4 issues. Let's do that again. 4 issues that we could all agree on.
All my life. You don't go to the shop floor and go, hey, who here is a Boogaloo boy? You're out. Who here is a Proud Boy? You're out. Who here is a libertarian? You're out. Who's a gun nut? You're out. Who's a Trumper? You're out. Okay, who's left? Now we're going to organize against the man together. That's not how it works. Right? When you organize along class lines, you organize along class lines around a central idea, and it's always economic, and you're screwing me. And so
it's always economic. So that's actually why you came to my attention, because you were interested in economics and foreign policy. And the conversation on the left revolves almost exclusively around identity, which is, in other words, me. Narcissism is about me.
Yeah.
But you kept talking about economics. That used to be the central conversation on the left, or in America, actually.
Yeah.
Why no more?
Because the establishment has learned how to co-opt identity politics to put the brakes on economic progress and justice. So the joke I do. So if you want to help, I would say if you want to help Black people, nothing would help them more than free college, student loan relief, and Medicare for all, and a living wage. You want to help them? That would be the way to help them. But Joe Biden comes in, does none of those things, but he makes Juneteenth a holiday. So do you understand what I'm talking about?
Oh, I do understand.
So it's all signals, but there's no substance. We're signaling that we want to help the minority community, but we're not actually helping them. So that's what identity politics is. It's a big diversion. And the joke I say, you know, if it was 1860, the Democrats would be bragging about their first transgendered slave owner.
So you say stuff like that, I mean, they must really hate you for
Yeah, but that's true. They're bragging about that they have transgendered people as superdelegates and things. I mean, it's like, what is going on? This is not, there was a thing on Twitter where this liberal news person, I don't know who it was. She did this, it was a woman, and she said all the top 10 CEOs making all this money, right? It was gross amount of money that they're making. And I thought the point was going to be about income disparity. And her point was, where are the women? She was like, she wanted women to be rapacious oligarchs too. That was the problem, that there weren't enough women doing that. And now women are they're the heads of weapons companies, right? It's awesome. I did a whole thing on like all the big weapons companies, manufacturers, now they have female CEOs.
Women can profit.
Isn't that crazy?
So that brings us to foreign policy, where you really have stepped outside the lines. In fact, I think you live outside the lines. I think you set up a permanent encampment outside the lines. So to kind of give our audience some sense of what those lines are, we just have a quick montage of 4 or 5 familiar TV people responding to the latest bombing campaign in Syria, which was this spring in March. And here's how they greeted it.
I do think it was important for the Biden administration to send a message, a very clear message early on, that these attacks on our forces will not be tolerated.
We're going to take a proportionate response, that we're going to respond. And we hit back at them. And I think it's just sort of resetting expectations that if you hit at us, we're going to punch back.
No one likes to talk about the fact that we have to protect ourselves, but that's the national security reality. And I think the Biden administration understands it and they're acting accordingly.
I think that that President Biden is pursuing a tough but smart approach.
Is it a mistake to target bases in Syria right now?
Actually, it was pretty smart. This is counterterrorism. So I don't think the Biden administration needed new permission or authorization from the Congress.
My favorite is Jeremy Bash saying we need to protect ourselves. Really, what are our interests in Syria exactly? Do you know?
I love that it's all new ways to keep the war machine going. They have to invent they have to invent monsters and boogeymen. And my favorite thing was not my favorite thing, but one of the best examples of this was how they got us crazy about ISIS. Chris Matthews would show videos of the beheadings, right? He was like, oh my God, the president has to do something about, they have kitchen knives. That we're supposed to be afraid of them. They have kitchen knives, and they're gonna cut your head off with a kitchen knife. And I would always say, yeah, why don't we blow their heads off with a nice Christian bomb? What do you think? It's just nuts, right? So that's how they keep it going, right? It's like, and why are we in Syria? You tell me why we're in Syria. A lot of people have it certainly isn't because we want to help the people of Syria. That's what people say. Oh, we have to bomb.
It's because Assad is a monster.
Yeah.
There's for every country that we say we need to step in for human rights, there's like 20 countries that we aid, assist, give defense to, like, who knows, that are doing the same or worse. Like, Saudi Arabia is like the worst human atrocity on the planet, and we do everything for them, give them weapons, because they prop up the petrodollar. That's the only reason.
We're anti-monster, and wherever monsters exist, we slay them.
I felt that way ever since I found out Assad developed a worldwide torture program and centered it in Guantanamo Bay, and then invaded Iraq and killed millions of people. Did the same thing in Libya. Assad is a maniac. Oh wait, that wasn't him. Who was that?
So the last administration had a couple of bombing campaigns against Syria, and the very first one was justified by a chemical weapons attack within the country. We were told, immediately, even before inspectors reached the site, that this was a chemical attack by the Assad government against innocents. And that was repeated universally by everybody. Again, before they even reached the site to verify it had happened. You were one of the only people in the entire media landscape who doubted that story. And you did it in public. What happened next?
Well, when I doubted...
The only person. Just so everybody knows, Ava Bartlett, Vanessa Beeley are literally spent a third of their time in that region of the world, and they were on top of that from the beginning. So his first speculations were pooled probably from libertarian and other people that are in their sphere, and that he saw that because they were instantly jumping on that. But that was super independent, maybe Mint Press News or trying to think of the one that I'm not going to think of the other. I haven't been paying attention to them because you have to be on completely independent sites and only specific sites because the stuff these guys talk about are always suppressed and they get deleted and strikes on YouTube constantly. But I'm sure if if Jimmy wanted to dig into it, like Ava Bartlett and Vanessa Beeley were screaming about that when it happened. So.
I was on a panel on the Young Turks with 3 people, and they were all pro-war, and they were all trying to figure out ways. Well, Jimmy, what circumstances? What would it take for you to be for bombing Syria? What if this? What if that? I'm like, well, what if it helps me? I'm like, I don't know what you think, but Barack Obama doesn't care about the people in Syria. The reason why he bombed Syria isn't because he's upset that somebody got killed with a chemical weapon. 50 people, by the way, or whatever it was, that got killed. I go, this is obviously to get us to want to bomb them and to manufacture consent for war. And they would all go, no, it's this, and I'm like. Well, if we're going to bomb to help people, why don't we bomb North Korea? Why aren't we bombing Russia? Why don't we bomb? And they're like, well, we can't do that because they could hit us back. And I'm like, so you want to bomb countries that they don't have the ability to bomb us back and kill innocent people to help innocent people? And like, I'm just throwing logic at them, and they didn't like. I don't know. I go, how many innocent people are we supposed to kill in Syria? Oh, I don't have a number. That was actual. And so that's what happened, and and it just kept going. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And that was right after we did Libya. Right. So I mean, how you see Iraq, you see Libya, and by the way, they're still misreporting Libya. You know, they don't care. I mean.
So yeah, this is a better conversation than some of the other conversations I've watched in the past couple weeks. This was 10 days ago, so sorry for the late intro. And but again, I haven't watched it yet, so sit there with me. We'll watch it at a little bit fast speed and
in the mainstream news. And
can you summarize what happened in Libya?
So in Libya, we all got the NATO powers like France, Britain, the United States. They overthrew Gaddafi. And they instituted a failed state with open slave markets that is run by terrorists. And then they use a lot of the weapons from there. They funneled those into Syria. And a lot of those fighters up, they helped those. Yeah. So
there was a reason there were so many CIA contractors in Benghazi, you're saying?
Yeah, I'm saying.
They were moving weapons into Syria. Now, these are conflicts that the average American doesn't know exist, right?
Right. So there's Timber Sycamore. People don't even know about that, right? So you could look it up. It was the CIA would give.
Hold on a second, just because, anybody watching right now, please tell me. I've heard of this so many times, but you don't not know what Timber Sycamore is, because that is a CIA thing that I thought like everybody in the independent circle has hit at least once, if not several times. So, wow. I'm gonna let it play, but I really thought everybody knew this by now.
Weapons and money to terrorists to go try to overthrow Assad. And they've been trying to overthrow Assad since at least 2006. I have an interview with Assad and Christina Amanpour, and she says, a lot of people are talking about regime change. This is in 2006, and they try to make it look like the regime change started with the Arab Spring, which it didn't. That's not how this started. This started as the CIA did this, right? So, and people don't realize that. That's what the CIA does. And no one will say why they really want to go into Syria, but they wanted to overthrow Syria for a long time. Some people speculate it's because they want to put a pipeline through Syria, and I've seen that, and I wouldn't doubt it. That's why they want to do it. A lot of people say because of Israel's interest in there. So I'm sure it has to do with Saudi Arabia and Israel.
So it would, I have no idea, but it would be worth knowing why, Americans have died there, by the way. Lots of Syrians have died. We prolonged the agony of that country's civil war, obviously. So you'd think like the role of journalists is to find out. Maybe not take a position even, but just like bring the facts. And yet, the response has been like this. This is Brian Williams, who I believe is smart enough to know better, responding to a Syrian missile strike. Watch.
We see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these 2 U.S. Navy vessels in the eastern Mediterranean. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons. And they are beautiful pictures of fearsome armaments making what is for them a brief flight over to this airfield. What did they hit?
Now, I'm just sad that Sigmund Freud is gone, because the psychosexual analysis of that would be super interesting.
Yeah.
You look at these beautiful missiles. I don't even know what to make of that. What do you make of that?
I mean that they just grow up with this reverence for war. It's like the only knowledge they get is from World War II movies. It's like, have you not watched Private Ryan? If you're going to do that, watch Private Ryan. You're going to understand what war is really like, and then you wouldn't be cheering it on because it's horrible, right? And so, but they do. They cheer it on, and they said on CNN that's when he became president, because when he bombed, right? So Americans love bombing other countries. I don't know. Why do you think Brian Williams got that job? He didn't get that job because he was skeptical of when we bombed people. He got that job because he cheers it on.
It just feels like such a perversion of his job. If you're a spokesman for General Dynamics, that seems like a legitimate position. You know what I mean? Our missiles work. Got it. But if you're a news anchor...
Tom Brokaw got an award from a military institution, right? I forget now, I'm blanking on the name of the thing, but like some war college or something. They gave him the biggest award you could give a guy. They gave it to a journalist. Are you kidding me? They should hate him. He's supposed to be exposing all the lies and the wars and the things. And of course he does the greatest generation. How about the generation that screwed us? How about that? The generation that took it all for themselves and set up a system that leaves 80% of the workers living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of Americans can't afford a $400 emergency. How about that? That generation. Tell me about that generation. So anyway, that's how bad. Yeah, you're right. But Tucker, how did people get to be an NBC? How do you get to be on television as I would never be. As soon as I said something, they would fire me. As soon as I told the truth about Syria, as soon as I told the truth about whatever, I would get fired, right?
Right.
I don't know. It's just so interesting. So I have strong feelings on foreign policy, which are basically out of step with the party that I generally vote for, which is the Republican Party. And the leadership doesn't, they're right. Way on the other side. So I kind of assumed that my views were very unpopular among our audience, which is being as honest as I can be. So I see you and I think, well, I'm sure, we don't agree on a lot, but I absolutely agree with what you just said. And I really admired your bravery for saying it. So I thought, let's have Jimmy Dore on. So we have you on, and I was stunned by the reaction. So our producers keep it pretty, sophisticated. Like we know who's watching and what they like and what they don't. You can tell in the numbers. Our audience really liked it when you came on. I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked by that. So it does make me think, and these are people who I bet have never voted for a single person you voted for. So it does make me think that some of these ideas are like a lot more popular than you would know from watching conventional media outlets.
Right. You would never know. You would never know there was a big faction of anti-war people in the country watching the mainstream news media.
Ever. You would never know that.
You wouldn't even know there was an Occupy Wall Street movement happening for at least the first 2 weeks of it happening. Those people had to drive through it on their way. I remember I was watching MSNBC and they were looking out their window going, what do they want anyway? I don't know. Why don't you walk the 15 feet and ask them? They're not going to do that, Aaron Burnett. But
did you ever see the study, and I don't know the name of the genius who did it, but he just went to a nexus and found that after 2012 when Occupy Wall Street emerged, the rate of the use of the word racist in the New York Times, USA Today, and the Washington Post went up by like 600%.
Really?
Yes.
I know that. Okay.
Yes. It's not proof, but it suggests what's really going on, which is all this, a lot, not all, there's racism, it's worth talking about, but the focus on unsolvable race problems was designed to keep you from talking about solvable economic problems and the distribution of wealth in the country.
Well, I think I don't know if that's 100% true, but it's certainly partly true.
Exactly. I don't think it's 100% true.
Right. So but the response to Trump wasn't, how can we make people's lives better so they don't vote for a guy like that again?
Right.
The response was, we've got to let everybody know that he's only there because of racism and everything else is fine. And that's crazy. I mean, I would be at these.
And Russia. Can't forget Russia. Russia was the issue, and now we bombed them. And it's all Biden's fault that we want to bomb them. And I don't even. Like literally 2 weeks ago when I started doing this live streaming, like Ukraine was like a single question in the mainstream media. In the last 2 weeks, it's unraveled in front of my face and it's killing me. So luckily I hadn't started yet. Like literally this is 10 days ago and the Ukraine explosion, I don't think it started quite yet. Like it's just been the tip of that snowball, and it's now kind of more of a avalanche at this point, but it hadn't started yet. I'll be interested to see if they say anything.
Hollywood parties right after Trump was elected, and I would be like, it's because of economic pain in the country. They're like, no, this is racism, this is 100%. And I'm like, come on, Trump didn't invent racism. 3 out of the last 4 RNC chairpersons had to apologize for the Southern strategy. They've been doing this forever. What are you talking about? Ever since the parties realigned after civil rights, what are you guys talking about? They've been doing this. This isn't new. The thing that is new is that we're now voting for a TV show, game show host con man, because we're so desperate. That's what's new. And they didn't want to hear, and that's when they did Russiagate. So it's got to be racism and Russiagate. It can't be economic pain. It can't be the fact that people can't pay their medical bills. Right. It can't be that GoFundMe is our health insurance. It can't be that in the richest country the face of the earth has ever seen. And I ask people, what do you call an economic system that takes the richest country the earth has ever seen and renders half of its population poor or low income? You call that a failed system. And people need to recognize that we're living in a failed system. We've got the wealth. They just gave $5 trillion, the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history, and they got every progressive to vote for it, including Bernie Sanders. We are living in a failed system. No matter who you elect, it's not going to make a difference. So the quicker people realize that our political system is 100% corrupt, rapacious oligarchy, and that we have to have direct action and get in the street, which is what always gets things done, right? When we got civil rights, Martin Luther King, you've got to get in the streets and you've got to make things happen. If we're going to have healthcare, we're going to have education, we're going to have a living wage, we're going to have to make them give it to us. Power gives you nothing unless you have a demand. I don't know how
that's the opposite of what I see, though. I mean, it's pretty clear in every society I've ever read about, change happens when the professional class decides to bring change. Because actually, people who are living paycheck to paycheck don't have enough power to affect change. And honestly, they don't, okay? So that would mean college students, people who have an actual shot of getting a job at McKinsey. They're the ones you need on board if you want change, because they will be running the country. I've never even met one who's interested in any economic question whatsoever.
So
have you noticed this?
Yes, I noticed this. They're all a bunch of Pete Buttigieg's, right?
Assuming we're pronouncing that correctly.
So yeah, they're all just different shades of the establishment. That's all they are. But I thought we had to, like FDR, right? So FDR, he didn't bring socialism to America. They say he saved capitalism, and the way he did it.
Okay, I got to stop right there just because of the socialism. I got to say this. I'm going to possibly do an episode on socialism, or maybe start doing segments, because when I get attacked for socialist ideas, it's kind of frustrating. Like, I don't know. That's not right here. Right, of course. Anyhow, Howard Zinn, with his book, like, he talks about like the socialist movements, and there's a massive socialist movement from 1900 to 19 to World War, through World War I and after, up into the first pandemic there, the first, new society pandemic. And that happened, socialism is not just like this underground thing. It was some of the smartest people on the planet. And, going back, he just mentioned Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King was a socialist. He believed in socialism. But before him, Einstein and William Sidis, and I want to do a segment, I think, just on William Sidis, because possibly the smartest American ever to live, was a socialist who, stood and got arrested in protest. He got arrested at protest for this, wanted, complete socialism. As the smartest person on the planet, he wrote several books on black holes, and died early at like 40-something of cancer and complications. So, like, that's not just some far-fetched idea that some crazy people think. Some of the smartest people in history have believed in this social benefit of governments, not just, benefit for the couple dozen people that work for Raytheon, Halliburton, and such.
He told his rich friends, if we don't give them some of our money, they're going to take all of our money, because he just saw the revolutions that had happened in the world. And so he said
his cousin Teddy Roosevelt, same thing.
Right? And so he figured that out. You got to give people, so he gave Social Security, and you want a job, I'll give you a job. Why doesn't the government do that? Why does the government, instead of giving you welfare or whatever, say, hey, if you want a job, we'll give you a job. Go give it. And then, so there's no reason that you don't have a job, because we're going to give you a job. We could do that. We have the money. Again, over and over, we prove that we have the money. It would take $20 billion to end homelessness. They increased the military budget by $20 billion already under Joe Biden. They could have did it. They could have ended homelessness.
Well, so wait a minute, let's go back. That's such an interesting point. So the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps, was the largest mobilization ever in American history during peacetime. Douglas MacArthur actually ran it at first. And they built the infrastructure of our national parks, and they built, they're everywhere. To this day, it was 90 years ago. We did a wonderful job.
Yes.
Every stone barbecue at a pullout in a national park was built by those guys, and they were young men who didn't have jobs, they got jobs. No one even and I think it was an amazing thing that they did. It was useful. And it gave dignity to people who did it.
Yes.
And it gave them money.
Yes, and it stimulates the economy. Demand side economics, not supply side.
So now you've had a lot of hurting people after the COVID shutdowns. I mean, indisputably, a lot of people with like no money, they couldn't work. Instead, we just write them checks, which is better than letting people starve, of course. But why didn't anybody say, let's give people skills, dignity, jobs, rather than handouts to which they become dependent?
I don't know.
Yeah, why did we not have people working for $800, $900 a week from the federal government working to help do things? Like, there's so many social things that we could be paying people to do that we won't pay them to do, because then that's creating social net safe. Like, there's arguments against both sides, and he's gonna, of course, we're gonna gloss past that, I'm gonna guess, but there's social things that we could do with this money, like employing people in ways that would help society, but that would, be government spending.
Maybe because that would, I don't know, I'm speculating, but maybe they don't have jobs programs because that would raise the wages of the regular workers and put economic pressure on private employers, right? Now they have to compete with these people who actually have an alternative. So right now they're getting unemployment, and a lot of employers are saying we can't get people to come work. Yeah, because you pay shit and you offer no benefits, and these people have a better life on unemployment. What does that tell you about our system? Right? So, yeah, that's why they don't want to have that. I mean, that's my speculation, why we don't have a good paying jobs program in the United States. Why don't we?
It's certainly better than sapping the life out of people. But I mean, you don't want to be idle. Every time I've been fired and I don't have a mission or a purpose, it really degrades how you feel about yourself. I don't know if you've ever been out of work, but
Yes.
it's not good for you at all. At least for a man, it's not good for you at all.
Well,
at all.
Not only that, but the stress of poverty, they've done studies that shows that the stress of poverty actually reduces your IQ, right? Because you're stressed.
Right.
And so that they're like, people are like, why do poor people make poor choices with their money? And it's like, well, one of the reasons is because they're stressed, because they don't have money and they don't know how to, and so they make bad decisions. And they've proven this through.
I can attest, like literally that first month of COVID, I felt like my brain was losing out. I couldn't. My anxiety levels were through the roof. But just the unsure, the 24/7 news cycle just gathering you and like just throwing my anxiety out of spill. But like not having an income, not knowing when my income was going to come back. Being a bartender, you never knew when bars were going to reopen, if that was going to be a thing, if we're just going to shut down, if society was going to change their idea on it. Luckily, I found out from the pandemic that you guys, not possibly people watching this, but expensive people need bartenders. They need us badly. They need drinks in front of them. They need somebody to pretend to agree with them because they need that constantly. Like they need their tips to, like they would not like it if I actually make money somehow on that, because they need their tips to be like, you got to agree with me. If not, I'm not going to give you money. And they love that. Like I swear people get off on it. Like the power trip of that, just that interaction. So I learned that that's never going to go away because they need that. They need that interaction.
And so we need to take the stress away from those people. We need to give people, health care, a living wage, and then they can start living up to their potential, and they won't have that kind of stress. And we could do it so easily. We could get rid of student loan debt. They just gave $1 trillion tax credit under Trump. That would have got rid of the student loan. I mean, they could do these things, but they just don't want to because those people who are in the positions of power, they came from McKinsey, and they have no association with people like me. They have no connection. They have no idea what life is really like. They've done those studies. The richer you get, the less you have the ability to see the emotions in other people's face. You ever see those studies?
No.
Yeah. So
yeah, like decades of being a millionaire creates a lack of empathy. Like it creates you start to lose the ability to notice facial features and stuff that you lose empathy by being that rich for that long.
If you're, a millionaire for a bunch of years, you get less and less able to tell people's cues of emotions through their face. It's amazing that it happens that way.
I think it's like a decade by decade. Like if you've been a millionaire for 10 years, you lose a little bit. 20 years, you lose quite a bit. If you've been a mega millionaire for 20, 30 years, you start to lose completely all of it. So people like, Bezos, who's been a millionaire for 20 plus years, people like Bill Gates, who's been a millionaire since he was born, they have completely zero empathy.
I hope that happens to me.
How much of your politics derive from Catholic social teaching that you learned in high
I
school?
hope that happens to me someday.
I don't know. I just always had a sense of, that there was economic injustice. I just always saw it. And
hilarious.
And I always thought that I saw the effects of racism in Chicago where I lived, right? I saw how they treated them, how they tried to cattle them, house them, and get them away from everybody. And I saw the way the police treated minorities, blacks, and so I just always had an inner sense of it. And my parents were the opposite of that kind of. So in my neighborhood, people would use the N-word all the time and stuff like that. And my parents weren't like that. They were the opposite. My parents, you couldn't do any of that in the house and all that. And so they were really good people. So I had that. I just had a sense of, I saw my dad had to work 2 jobs his whole life. And of course, my mom worked her head off. And I just saw everybody in my neighborhood work their head off, and I saw the rich people not working at all. And so I just always had this sense of it like that. So I don't know where if it comes from Catholicism. I kind of rebelled against Catholicism. But yeah, so I wouldn't really chalk it up to Catholicism.
Well, last thing I want to ask you about is your job. And you've said, there's no chance that you could get.
Last thing you're going to ask me, he started the whole interview about his job. Like that was the whole introduction. You're going to finish with the same thing you started. I mean, the middle of the segment was good. You know what? They agreed upon everything pretty much. Almost no pushback. That's like a Joe Rogan segment right there. Like we'll just talk about what we agree with, and I'll agree with you, and we'll just make sure you don't talk non-facts.
Get a gig on NBC. You can't even get on MSNBC, right? And
they're getting ready to kick me off YouTube.
Well, so that's my question. You work on. You do live shows, yes, and always have. But you make your living in part at least on YouTube. What's that like?
It's scary because right now the head of YouTube is not on our side. Like it's not YouTube. She wants you to go to corporate news. So the head of YouTube did an interview where she bragged about that. They call independent news borderline content. That's what they call it. And she bragged that they had suppressed us 80%. So I used to get 16 to 18 million views.
Oh, Borderline content. So like people who film events, who their channel gets taken down, but then their filming gets used on all the networks for things like January 6th and things like riots and rallies. When they use those footages, they usually take those people's channel down, but then steal their content. And then they're going to call them fringe people when they have to use their content because mainstream media doesn't use any actual cameras. Like they don't have anybody on the streets. They use all their money for their freaking anchors. They don't give money to actual on the ground journalism. There's no boots on the ground journalism. There's none. There's zero.
Views a month, and now I'm getting 6 to 8 million views a month. So they're suppressing us, right? And even then, we're still breaking through. So, and it's scary because once they want to take you down, they can go get a video from 5 years ago and say this violated our standards and our new standards, and so we're going to take your channel down. They're doing that left and right. And again, it's about, there's certain sensitive topics, right? You can't talk about foreign war. You can't tell the truth about the military. You can't talk about vaccines, that's for sure. They've been taking people down left and right. So Matt Taibbi even wrote an article about how come we don't have free speech around healthcare? And what is this? So
why is that? Why do you think you can't talk? And what would you say about vaccines if you could? Because you can here.
Okay, well, I would just tell what happened to me. I would talk about ivermectin.
Well, what happened to you?
So on April 17th, I got my second shot, Moderna shot, and I never got better.
Had you had COVID before?
No, I never had COVID. I had an underlying condition, so my doctor recommended I get it. It's experimental vaccine, which I was wary of, and I didn't want to get it because I've exposed Fauci as being a liar on my show pathologically, and so I was not into it. And of course, I'm skeptical of big pharma, like we should be.
Yeah.
And but I went to my doctor, and my doctor's like, no, you have this underlying condition, so you better get it. And so I followed my doctor's advice, and I got it, and I never got better.
What does that mean? You never got better?
So I have flu-like symptoms, joint pain. On the 5th week, my neck got stiff. And my producer of my show had the exact same thing at the 5th week. And I'm like, well, this obviously. So I look it up, I Google it. Oh, this is a thing. And that it happens on the side that you got the shot. I got my shot on my right side, my stiff. He got his on the left. And that's when I tweeted about it. And I go, hey, it's been 5 weeks, and I'm still experiencing all these things. And then a doctor contacted me who's been working with people like me. And he said, yeah, there's thousands of people like you. We have this thing. We think it's the spike protein, blah, blah, blah. And he said, call your doctor, go to your doctor on Monday, have your doctor call me, and we'll have a consultation. Because my doctor had to prescribe for me. And so my doctor, when I sit down and I start telling my doctor about my problem, my doctor looks at me and says, I'm treating 5 people just like you. One of them is a neurologist, and one of them is a nurse, and they're both afraid to talk about it because they're afraid to be stigmatized. That's how bad it is. That's how politicized medicine has gotten because of the Democrats and Trump.
Science should not be politicized. Like, we should not, people have opinions. People have, in every industry, have opinions. So you're going to find doctors, lawyers, school teachers, everybody's going to have different opinions because of how they were raised and who they are. But once we can reach a consensus, we need to put those facts forward, because facts are through hypothesis, thesis. There's a whole process, and we need to let the science world do that, not make it politics. The science world shouldn't cross into politics until it's fact.
Is that doctors and nurses are afraid to talk about the symptoms they got from an experimental vaccine. And so when I went on Twitter and I talked about this, people were calling me a faker and they were calling me anti-vax. I'm like, no, I got the vax. I got the vax. How could you call me anti-vax? They think I'm making it up for some kind of crazy reason or something. Like, that's not how science works. You don't tell people who are taking an experimental vaccine, keep your reactions to yourself. No, you're supposed to tell people so we can make the vaccine safer. They have to know what's happening. And so, but that's not the world we live in. Like I said, the left became a bunch of authoritarian conformists. And so anything that goes outside that punches their bubble, they don't want to hear. It's crazy what's happening. But I should even be nervous to talk about my reactions to a medical treatment that's experimental, because I'll be stigmatized. And that's what people are going to do. And that's the world we live in right now.
Well, you're the wronged party in this, unless I'm missing something.
No, I am the wronged party in this. And nobody's going to talk about this. So right now I'm taking ivermectin. I have to take fluvoxamine, which is an antidepressant, for inflammation in my brain.
And do you believe that is from the vaccine?
I didn't have it before. Yeah, my doctors think so. That's what my doctors are saying. My doctors think
that's insane.
There's a lot of insane things happening.
But I mean, this is happening at scale. So I mean, there are like more than 100 million people who've gotten this, and a lot of them have been pushed effectively against their will into getting it.
I was talking to this young lady, I forget her name, when I got here, and I was telling my story, and I said, how was yours? What happened with you and your vaccine? And she said, I didn't have any problems. I just was sick for a week. Oh wait, I never had headaches before, but I get headaches all the time now. That was just what I got here. She goes, oh yeah, I get headaches all the time now. So maybe people aren't connecting the dots, maybe people aren't talking. I don't know. I think the more people talk, the better, because that will help science. Keeping your symptoms and your reactions to an experimental vaccine secret is not going to help science.
Exactly. We need to, I mean, it's okay to accept that. Like, if this is going to be a vaccine that we're going to possibly have to take yearly, every fall to get ready for the winter COVID season, maybe we should talk about the side effects and, try to find a vaccine that doesn't have said side effects and not make it a political thing, not make it a Pfizer advertises the most, so they need to, be with the government thing. Like, let science work this out and not capitalism. Capitalism doesn't need to work this out. The government doesn't need to work this out.
I just have to ask you, what do you think this is about? I mean, why is, you think that's right?
Ivermectin is generic. Ivermectin is generic, and they can't make that much money off it. So, and ivermectin actually works as a prophylactic also.
Yes.
And so in Mexico City, I covered this. No one else is covering this. They had their hospitalization rates in Mexico City were skyrocketing, and they didn't know what to do. So the mayor of Mexico City gave an ivermectin pack to everybody in Mexico City, and everything went that way. And so they're not reporting that, are they?
But why would...
I never heard that. I had never once heard that.
Media, I mean, that's such an amazing story. It's just an amazing, like, leaving aside the moral implications of it, it's just like, that's amazing. Like, why wouldn't you report that?
Why wouldn't you report that, Tucker? Well, I don't know. Why wouldn't you report what Bill Binney said about the hack of the DNC server? You know what I mean? Why don't
the Russians did it?
He said they did it. They said it was a local thing. It wasn't. So why don't they? Because there's no money. Who sponsors the news? Pfizer, Moderna, right? Who? Eli Lilly. Who are the sponsors of the news? That's, so Noam Chomsky taught us, right? That's how they control the news, the ownership, right? And that's what it is. So now that's who pays the bills. When Chuck Todd goes to do a fact-checking segment and it's sponsored by Boeing, a defense contractor, I don't think I'm getting the facts. So this is my theory.
I can't think of a better one.
Okay.
Last question. Where's this go? Like, the media, communication, information, news landscape, of which, almost against your will, you're now a part. Where does that go?
What do you mean, where we going to end up?
Yeah, I mean, if you have a mass vaccination, just to name one among many examples, but a mass vaccination campaign where people literally can't get an education without getting the vaccine, whether they need it or not. So it affects everybody.
Yeah.
Every family's touched by this. And you're not even allowed to say out loud what the side effects are. Like, that's not a system that you can keep in place forever. That just that's not workable over time. So what replaces it?
Boy, I don't know, but it does.
That's dark ages.
I don't see this stuff changing because they're still talking about Trump. You know what I'm saying? There's still the establishment left is still trying to make everything about Trump and his followers and how scary they are. And they're still propping up Fauci. How is Fauci not in jail? I don't understand this guy.
I've asked that question myself.
I mean, but you can't even say anything bad about him because people will go, well, you're a crazier. No, this guy's the crazy. He's a liar. I'll prove it to you. So I don't see it getting better. I think this is a system they're going to try to sustain forever. I mean, things aren't getting better. I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer, but what do we disagree on, you and me?
I'm extremely pro-life.
Oh, okay.
Very. I just think abortion's horrible, so sad, awful. And so probably that.
Okay. Yeah, we do disagree on that, I guess. So, but you're consistent, whereas you're against killing people who are alive, too, right?
I am. Yeah. Big time.
Right. So that's...
Yeah, big time. So very much against
I just met a guy who's a fan of mine who's an evangelical Christian, and he said he's for open borders. And I said, why? And he said, because I believe in the Bible. And I was like, what? I'm like, I never heard of evangelical Christian. And so what do you say to that? Like, what do you say to, like, as a Christian, we have to treat certain people, we can help them and not? How did that funnel into your immigration?
My view on immigration is that it's a government function. Our churches is not a theocracy. The church doesn't run the country. And governments are defined by their borders. Citizenship is if you're going to have nation states, and maybe we don't, maybe we just have one big country controlled by one government. Seems like a bad idea to me. But if we're going with our current system where each country is a separate country and represents its own people and has an obligation to do that, then you got to represent your own people. And by own people in this country, this is a multiracial country, always has been. It's not defined by the race or even the language of the people who live here. That means all people, no matter what they look like. The distinction is, are you a citizen or not? That's the only meaningful distinction for the American government. Now, as a human being and a Christian, I have different obligations. So if there's someone from a foreign country comes and says, I need help, I don't say, oh, you're not an American citizen, I'm not going to help you. That's irrelevant to me, but I'm not the government. The government exists to help its citizens. There's no other reason to have a government. And so you have to make distinctions. And so
Man, that's like playing mental gymnastics with yourself all day. Jeez, oh Pete. Come on, Tucker, get over yourself.
You want Medicare for all. You can't have open borders because the entire world will show up. Why wouldn't they? And I wouldn't blame them. I often say this on my show. I don't blame anyone in Guatemala for moving here. I would too, immediately.
Me too.
Of course. So they're the last people I blame. But if you want to give a good life to your people, you have to keep it to your people. That's why you're the government. That's like, it's intrinsic, it's inherent to the system. And if there's another system that you think might work, I'd love to hear it. I just have never heard of it. And so anyway, so my view is it's just super simple. It's about citizenship. And if the second citizenship doesn't matter, then you're incapable of helping your people. And so like, why have a government? You know what I mean?
Okay, I see the, our government creating economic crisis all over Central America.
Yeah.
In Mexico, NAFTA hurt those rural farmers. That's why they're all coming. And, it turns it into factory farms too down there. So they're coming here because they're desperate economically.
For sure.
Right, they're not coming here for the sun. You know what I mean? They're
coming here for money.
Right, for economics.
Yeah, but I would say a couple of things. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Latin America, and one thing I have learned is, this is very complicated stuff. I think American foreign policy has really hurt a bunch of different countries. I say that all the time.
Yes,
I mean,
of course.
It's clearly true. On the other hand, it's one of many reasons these are screwed up countries, A. B, in the case of Weirdest in El Salvador, for example, 1/3 of all Salvadorans live in the United States. Of all living Salvadorans live in it, 1/3. So what do you think that does to El Salvador, actually? It doesn't help El Salvador. Like, there's still a country called El Salvador. It's a mountainous country in the middle, most densely packed country in Central America. And like, if all the ambitious people leave, what does it mean for them? Well, I asked the president, he's like, all the people who might be building a robust, happy society here have gone, and they're working as housekeepers in Santa Monica. Like, how's that good for us? It's not. It's terrible for us. Same in Syria. I remember was it the Bush administration or Obama administration? It's like, oh, all the Syrian doctors are coming. It's so great.
Well, that's that. Mm-hmm.
Well, what if you still live in Syria? Like, who's going to treat your wounds? Like, I have cancer. Oh shit! All the doctors are, they're in Chicago. So at a certain point, like
So what is the controversy about your immigration stance? What do people?
I'm a racist. It's like, don't listen to me because look. It's a means of social control. As I was saying, we had dinner last night. As I was saying last night, I have a bunch of opinions that are very non-mainstream, especially on foreign policy. But my racial opinions are like as mainstream and kind of boring and Dr. Seuss, like we're all created equal by God. I really believe that. We're all judged equally under the law. We should be rigorous in enforcing that. The same standard applies to everybody, period. That's the whole point of justice, is that it's equally applied, period. And I really believe that as like a core tenet. Like
Does he think it's happening now, or is he saying he thinks it should happen? Because it's fucking not happening now. That's not a thing. Crazy man.
Really believe that. So I was saying to my person, it's like, why are they, of all the things you could call me, I do have some crackpot views, like no doubt, but they have nothing to do with race. Why are they calling me a racist? And he's like, because that's how they get you off the air. That's how they shut you up. And I'm like, and I'm such a literal person. I was like, I don't really, because I accuse people of things I think they've done wrong. I do. I never attack people for things that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But they're accusing me of something, it's like the one sin I haven't committed. Why are they doing that? And it's a tactic.
So you'd agree the criminal justice system is racist, right?
No. I think that well, what does that mean? The system is racist.
Well, for instance, it's set up to over-police poor people and incarcerate them at higher rates. Because if you look at who's incarcerated, it's that, like, for instance, there's that study that you're 16 times more likely to be arrested for cocaine if you're black than if you're white, even though they consume it at the same rate.
The powder versus crack thing is the one place where you'd be like, that had a disparate impact. There's no doubt about it. But I think I was a police reporter. I was never, I've always been a civil liberties guy. So anyone with power, whether it's a beat cop or the Secretary of Defense, bears watching. That's just been my view of my whole life. So I think there are abuses, I've seen them, of individuals at the hands of the state by cops or anybody else. So I think that's a problem. I've always thought that. I think it now. But there are certain neighborhoods for reasons that are not entirely clear, and it's not just poverty, that have way more violence in them than other neighborhoods. I've thought a lot about it. I've written a lot about it. I wrote a book on it, tried to once. I don't really fully understand, but it's still true. And if you pull the police out of those neighborhoods, man, weak people get really hurt. I mean, that's just true.
Yeah.
And Eric Adams getting elected mayor of New York? What is that? So here's a black guy who's very liberal and everything and probably corrupt and doesn't even live in New York. He's got all these kind of problems. But he's like he's like a black guy. And all the white liberals are like, oh, can't elect him. Why? Because he said exactly what Al Sharpton said, which is defund the police. That's like a Sag Harbor thing. That's what they think is cool in, what would be the equivalent in LA?
Silver Lake?
Yeah, Silver Lake, exactly, thank you. That's like, only rich people think that's a good idea. If you're like an actual black person living in a dangerous neighborhood, you probably don't love the cops, I believe that. But pulling them out? Oh.
No, I never thought defund the police. I guess I had a different interpretation of that. I always thought defund the police was we're over-policing, we're spending too much, certainly in New York, and we could take some of those resources and give it to like social workers. So when a crazy guy is having a problem, you don't send 2 cops with a gun, you send a social worker and maybe some guys with a white coat, and you take him to a thing. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Totally.
So that's when I hear defund the police, that.
because Reagan got rid of crazy houses, and now we don't have places that are federally set up to take care of people. And we sent all those people out into the streets and increased the homelessness right then and there. So thank you, 1987. Thank you so much. Or 86 or whatever it was. Doesn't matter. Doesn't really matter at all. It was Reagan. It happened then. We could bring all that back. That would bring jobs back. That would get people off the streets. That would help, keep maybe some shooters out of the world. But that would create social nets that Republicans just can't handle.
That's what I hear. I just think, I saw this in Iraq, I saw this in Beirut, I saw it during Katrina. The second...
You love doing that. You love bragging about all the places.
I do. And here's the one lesson I learned. Here's the one lesson I learned from all the chaos is when chaos happens and no one's keeping charge, anyone with a gun becomes God. And everyone else has to bow down before that person. And usually it's a young guy with bad judgment, short-term goals, and no regard for other people's suffering. And it becomes a freaking hellscape immediately. And you have to, and who gets hurt? It's the weak. The weak get hurt. Women get raped. People have their shit taken. People get bossed around. It's bad. That's the one thing you can't have because the weak suffer.
Okay.
Don't you think?
No, I agree with you. I definitely have to have police, but I think we need to redo it totally. And I believe in community-based policing. So right now, when they hire a new police chief, he comes in and he tells everybody how we're going to police your city. No, you should have a citizen board that's going to tell the cops how you're going to police us. Like, for instance, just an example. Hey, when we pick up a kid for curfew, do you want us to arrest him? Do you want us to take us home? Take him home.
I feel like I should maybe do his interview with Michael Woods Jr. pretty soon, because that's where he got this idea. Community policing was for Michael Woods Jr. That I just did the interview with him a couple nights ago, or I'm sorry, these are all running together in my head. Sorry. But yeah, I just recently did that. So if you want to go back and check that out. But I do want to go over his interview with his last interview 5 years ago with Jimmy, because that's where he got this idea.
Oh, that would be what we want you to do in our community. We don't let the cop decide. We tell the cops how to do it.
I kind of agree with that.
So that's what we need, and we need to have the community run.
Like more local control.
Yes, and you get down and you tell the cops how to police us. You don't let the cops dictate, which is what's happening. They all get their training from Israel, and then they come into our cities and they go fucking crazy. I'm sorry, can I swear? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And they all go crazy, right? So and then half of them are staffed by ex-military, which is the wrong kind of people to have, and because they're trained to see the people that they're policing as the enemy, not as someone to be served. So we need to get back to that service. But I have a bunch of videos on this. I'm very into police reform, and there's aren't people joining the cops with good intentions? Yes, but those people get weeded out, or they succumb to the culture. And there's a culture problem with policing in America, and it's not just in one city. It's nationwide, and it's cultural. And right now I live in Los Angeles. They have the cops who live 50 miles away from where they patrol. That's wrong. They come in from Canyon Country into the inner city to patrol it. That's really wrong. You can't have that. When I grew up in Chicago, my dad had to live in the city if he was going to be a cop.
Yep.
And that's a great idea. You have to live in the community that you're going to police. That's one big change we should do. So I have a lot of ideas on that, not just on, but they, instead of defund the police, they should call it reinvest the police money, right? That would be, maybe that'd be better, because defund does not sound good. It sounds like we can't get rid of police.
No! Jimmy Dore, how long did that go? I'm going to ask my producer.
Did we go too long?
No, it was an hour and 7 minutes.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You don't need to be sorry at all. That was great.
Oh, okay.
And I enjoyed the hell out of it.
Me too. My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
So yeah, that was a good discussion too. We made it all the way through. So that was what I was going to go tonight. A couple good interviews, and just anybody else still going out there. Going to be sticking to the around midnight schedule. Sorry, I can't be more specific, but I'm a bartender. Get home late. Got a dog to take care of. So I'm going to take care of the dog now again before I start looking at tomorrow's stream. But I will be doing a stream around tomorrow, around midnight, the next 2 nights. And then Wednesday, I'll try to do a long and late stream, starting earlier, but do a longer stream and go over, like I said, medical marijuana, legalization of marijuana, legalization of psychedelics. Do a whole Weed Wednesday here. And there's a lot of stuff on the bills for there's stuff that you can sign to help petition get it on there, or there's actually bills and ballots coming up this electoral cycle worth going out and doing. And I'll do a Stony Progressive takedown, but we'll do state by state Weed Wednesday. I'll start with the East Coast states earlier and try to work to the West Coast states later. So anybody joining, coming out of the bar, coming out of your server shift can catch me talking about how to get possibly weed, psychedelics, whatever, legalized in your state. We'll do that Wednesday, but I got a couple more shows every night. right around midnight, and let's keep this thing going. Let's take down some incumbents, and let's stay stony